Architectures of spiritual consciousness, the visionary-receptive mode. The central intuition. The visionary-receptive mind begins from a claim that is both simple and difficult to accommodate. The sacred can become directly perceptible. It need not be inferred from the order of the cosmos, accepted through scripture, loved through devotion, enacted through ritual, or uncovered by stripping experience down to its silent ground. It may appear as presence, image, dream, voice, symbol, light, music, geometry, sudden knowledge, living form, or an encounter so overwhelming that the ordinary structure of reality is no longer entirely convincing afterward. The visionary does not primarily say that they have concluded that God exists, or even that they believe the goddess is real. The characteristic statement of this mode is more direct. I saw her. When Vivekananda asked Ramakrishna whether he had seen God, the force of the reply did not lie in philosophical ingenuity. Vivekananda had already encountered religious arguments, respected teachers, inherited doctrines, and metaphysical speculation. What shook him was that Ramakrishna did not speak as someone defending a proposition. He spoke as someone describing a reality more immediate to him than the question itself. Guruji Amritananda answered in the same register. When asked whether he had seen God, he corrected the formulation. He had seen her. The distinction mattered because the divine was not a general theological object. She had been encountered in definite forms, as Tripura Deva, as a young and intensely beautiful goddess, as luminous circles and geometries, and as an inexhaustible creative power manifesting through forms that exceeded his ability to reproduce them. What later became iconography, ritual, architecture, and temple began in the authority of direct perception. Other modes may reach profound spiritual certainty, but they reach it through different operations. The analytical mind tests claims and searches for what can withstand examination. The integrative architectural mind perceives hidden coherence among systems, symbols, and levels of reality. The devotional relational mind knows through love, surrender, and the felt reality of the beloved. The ritual sacramental mind gives sacred truth a body through repeated action, offering, sound, gesture, and consecrated form. The contemplative subtractive mind asks what remains when every image, identity, thought, and passing state has been released. The visionary receptive mind says, reality disclosed itself to me. Its authority is the authority of witness. This does not mean that testimony compels belief. A vision cannot normally be transferred intact from the consciousness of the receiver into that of the listener. The hearer still has to judge what is being claimed, what kind of person is making the claim, how the experience has been interpreted, and what kind of life has formed around it. Yet a genuine witness may communicate something before the content is accepted. The listener may sense that the speaker is not merely repeating doctrine, embellishing fantasy, or borrowing someone else's conviction. The certainty is embodied. The person speaks from somewhere the hearer may never have entered, yet the reality of the encounter is conveyed through the absence of strain, the quality of presence, and the degree to which the experience has already taken possession of the life without making the receiver theatrically eager to possess the audience. A genuine visionary may therefore do in a few words what years of argument cannot do. They may not prove the invisible world, but they can break the feeling that reality is closed. Before such an encounter, God may remain a concept, projection, inherited word, metaphysical possibility, or object of dispute. Afterward, even a skeptical listener may be forced to admit that there are human beings for whom this is not theoretical. That admission may become a crack in an entire worldview. Reality as capable of address. The central intuition of the visionary receptive mind is not merely that unusual experiences occur, it is that consciousness is capable of being addressed. The deliberate ego is not the sole author of everything that enters awareness. Something may arrive that was not planned, summoned, reasoned toward, or consciously imagined. It may contradict the receiver's expectations, overwhelm their emotional capacity, expose something they resisted knowing, or present a form whose symbolic density exceeds anything the conscious mind could have designed at that moment. The receiver experiences the event not primarily as invention, but as reception. This is why visionary language so often takes a passive form. The image opened, the words were given, she appeared, I was shown, I found myself inside the scene. The grammar reveals the structure of the encounter. The ordinary ego ceases to occupy the position of sovereign producer and becomes a threshold. This does not settle the metaphysical source of what arrived. Dreams, unconscious formations, bodily states, trauma, dissociated processes, symbolic disclosures, and divine presences may all appear without deliberate construction. The fact that an experience is unbidden establishes that the conscious ego did not simply manufacture it at will. It does not establish a complete account of where it came from. Yet, caution must not become another form of reduction. There are moments in which the person does not merely encounter autonomous psychic material, but what they know within the event itself as sacred reality. That knowledge may later require interpretation, testing, and correction. The receiver may misunderstand what the encounter asks, inflate its significance, attach mistaken doctrine to a genuine disclosure, or reduce an inexhaustible reality to the private form through which it appeared. None of these possibilities proves that the original encounter was empty. The mature position is therefore not that one can know only that something happened, while every spiritual recognition must remain indefinitely suspended. That secretly returns authority to the skeptical observer and deprives the visionary mode of its own voice. The stronger position is this: a person may possess authentic certainty regarding whom or what they encountered, without becoming infallible about every interpretation, command, or consequence derived from the encounter. The vision may be real while the interpretation remains partial. The deity may be genuine while the receiver misunderstands what the appearance means for their identity or mission. The sacred source and the human vessel must not be confused. The authority and limitation of immediacy. A visionary encounter often carries a degree of certainty that ordinary belief cannot reproduce. The person does not merely consider the experience probable. Thought, emotion, sensation, memory, and identity may reorganize around one undeniable fact: this happened. The encounter may appear more real than ordinary events because it arrives with a concentrated luminosity rarely present in daily life. Ordinary perception is often distracted, weak, and half conscious. A vision may possess an intensity of presence in which everything appears charged, coherent, and unmistakably alive. This is why attempts to persuade the visionary that nothing occurred may feel absurd from inside the event. The receiver may accept questions about explanation while remaining unmoved regarding the encounter itself. You may doubt what I think it meant, but you cannot persuade me that I did not meet what I met. This visceral certainty is the mode's great power. It is also the beginning of its danger. The certainty proper to the encounter can spread outward into claims the encounter itself did not establish. The receiver moves from I encountered her to I understand completely why she appeared, then to I know what she requires, then to my interpretation carries her authority, and finally to anyone who questions me is questioning her. The visionary mode must therefore learn one of the hardest disciplines in spiritual life: preserve the certainty of encounter without transferring that certainty into every conclusion drawn from it. The experience may be direct, interpretation remains human, the encounter may be pure, while memory, language, culture, personality, desire, and fear shape the testimony. The sacred may appear, but the receiver must still learn how to understand what appeared. This distinction does not weaken visionary authority. It protects the encounter from being consumed by the receiver's need for total certainty. Interruption rather than accumulation. The visionary mode proceeds primarily through interruption. Ritual works through continuity. A gesture is repeated until it reshapes perception. A mantra enters breath and body through thousands of returns, and a sacred world is slowly constructed and inhabited. Vision works differently. Years of prayer, meditation, sadhana, suffering, purification, or disciplined preparation may precede it. Yet the decisive event arrives as something that cannot be reduced to the sum of those preparations. One moment opens, a form appears, a voice is heard, a dream contains more reality than waking life, a symbol becomes alive. A person who believed themselves to inhabit a closed universe is placed before something that does not fit inside it. The life divides into before and after. This does not make preparation unnecessary. Practice may stabilize the nervous system, provide a symbolic language, protect against inflation, and make later embodiment possible. But practice cannot always manufacture disclosure. The goddess is not a mechanism. The sacred remains free to appear or not appear. The person may prepare the room. They cannot compel the guest. The deepest effect of the encounter may therefore be less the information communicated than the destruction of an unnecessarily closed world. The receiver may continue to question what happened. They may explore psychological, neurological, cultural, and theological explanations. But the old enclosure has already been ruptured. Reality has become larger than the previous map. A person may still possess no mature doctrine, discrimination, teacher, or conceptual language adequate to the event, yet they now know that the ordinary surface of life is not necessarily the whole. A door has opened, and even if it closes immediately, the wall can no longer command complete confidence. The visionary mode restores ontological courage. It refuses the premature claim that only the measurable is real, while also refusing the opposite error that everything imaginable therefore exists, exactly as imagined. The mature visionary stands between reduction and credulity. They neither seal the world nor surrender it to every passing image. The sacred freedom to take form. At the heart of this mode lies a metaphysical intuition. The sacred is free to appear. Form is not necessarily a fall from truth. Image is not necessarily concealment. Relation is not necessarily ignorance. The goddess appearing before a devotee does not require ultimate reality to divide into two completely independent substances. The appearance may be relational without being absolutely dual. The formless may take form without being exhausted by form. The infinite may become intimate without ceasing to be infinite. A face may disclose what abstraction cannot. A voice may penetrate where doctrine remains external. A divine body may awaken dimensions of love, terror, beauty, and surrender that no impersonal formula can reach. The visionary mode does not deny the formless. It denies that formlessness possesses a monopoly on ultimacy. The sacred may disclose itself as silence, but also as Kala, Christ, Buddha, an angel, a guru, a child Gopala playing within a house, radiant geometry, an imaginal landscape, or a presence known more intimately than the visible room. The mature visionary does not need to claim that the appearance exhausts the sacred. They say, I saw her in this form, not this form contains everything she can ever be. The form is real as disclosure while remaining partial as definition. The testimony of a transformed life. Because the vision cannot usually be transferred, its most persuasive evidence is often the life that follows. The revelation becomes credible not simply because the receiver speaks with confidence, but because the encounter has demanded something of them. It may lead to decades of disciplined work, ethical reorientation, courage, service, artistic or ritual creation, greater humility, new forms of community, or the ability to endure long silence without manufacturing replacement experiences. The visionary's statement matters. I saw. But the fuller testimony is, look at what the seeing required me to become. A powerful experience without embodiment remains spiritually unfinished. A revelation producing only storytelling, status, or appetite for further states has not yet reached its mature fruit. The visionary is not merely someone to whom something appeared, but someone through whom the appearance entered life. In Ramakrishna, revelation became living presence. In Guruji Amritananda, it became iconography, geometry, ritual, architecture, and an inhabitable sacred world. In Ma Mani, it became continuous participation in Lila and written testimony. The forms differ because the receivers differ. Revelation passes through a human being and therefore acquires the shape of that person's culture, wounds, capacities, vocation, and dominant modes of consciousness. The sacred may be the source. The human being remains the medium. This is why visionary discernment can never concern the event alone. It must also ask what the receiver makes of it, what it makes of the receiver, and whether its historical embodiment becomes larger than the identity built around having received it. The unique gift. The visionary-receptive mind gives spiritual life something that no other mode can fully replace: the authority of encountered reality. It says that the sacred is not merely the object of humanity's longing, philosophical construction, inherited memory, or ritual preservation. The sacred may answer, interrupt, look back, and enter the private chamber of consciousness with such force that the receiver can no longer honestly call it hypothetical. This power must not be romanticized. A person may mistake fantasy for revelation, attach false certainty to a genuine encounter, obey a destructive voice, build identity around being chosen, or compel others to live inside an unverifiable private world. These dangers must be faced directly, but the shadow must not be permitted to erase the dignity of the gift. Without the visionary mode, religion risks becoming entirely retrospective. It speaks of revelations given to founders long ago, preserves scriptures recording what others saw, repeats ritual forms created from encounters no longer experientially alive, and argues about God while quietly assuming that no one present can actually meet God. The visionary interrupts this historical distance. They say that it did not only happen then, and sometimes, with the simplicity capable of overturning a life. Yes, I have seen. Consciousness may be more than a producer of representations. It may be a place of encounter. Reality may be more than a closed field of objects. It may possess the power to address. The sacred may appear at the beginning of a path, rupture the previous world, and demand that the rest of the life become large enough to bear what was seen. What the visionary receptive mind is not. The visionary receptive mode is easily misunderstood because its central experiences occur near several unstable borders. Vision resembles imagination. A sacred voice may resemble an intrusive thought. A dream may resemble fantasy. Trance may resemble dissociation. An overwhelming presence may resemble projection. And a genuine revelation may arrive through a nervous system that is exhausted, wounded, culturally conditioned, physically ill, or temporarily unstable. None of these resemblances is accidental. Revelation does not enter human life through a neutral instrument. It enters through memory, language, body, emotion, expectation, symbolic inheritance, imagination, and personality. This makes simplistic conclusions dangerous in both directions. The skeptic says that because the experience arose through consciousness, it was merely imaginary. The credulous believer says that because it was not deliberately constructed, it must have come from a supernatural being exactly as perceived. The first assumes that psychological mediation excludes sacred reality. The second assumes that autonomy from conscious intention proves a complete metaphysical interpretation. The visionary receptive mode preserves its dignity only by refusing both reductions. It is not ordinary imagination or compensatory fantasy. Ordinary imagination usually contains some degree of voluntary construction. A person deliberately pictures a scene, anticipates a conversation, invents a character, or enters a symbolic world through artistic intention. Vision is received differently. It appears to possess autonomy. The person may not have chosen its timing, content, emotional force, form, language, or consequence. A vision may contradict the receiver's theology, expose something resisted, or demand a transformation they would never have chosen. Its characteristic grammar is passive. She appeared, the words came, I was shown. This distinguishes vision from ordinary deliberate imagery, but it does not settle the source. Dreams generate entire worlds without deliberate authorship. Forgotten memories return. Fear produces images. Grief makes the dead feel present. Bodily conditions alter perception. Unconscious material may organize itself with an intelligence greater than the surface ego can claim. It is not devotion intensified. The visionary receptive and devotional relational modes often meet within the same person. A devotee longs for the beloved, remembers the divine name, speaks inwardly to a sacred presence, and may eventually receive visions, voices, dreams, or an overwhelming sense of response. Ramakrishna, Mamani, and many Christian Sufi and Bhakti mystics cannot be understood by separating vision completely from devotion, yet the governing operations remain distinct. The devotional relational mind is organized primarily around love, surrender, intimacy, fidelity, and relation to the beloved. Its central truth does not depend upon the beloved becoming perceptible through extraordinary experience. A devotee may pass through decades of silence, dryness, absence, and unanswered longing while the relationship remains the center of life. Devotion asks how the person loves, serves, trusts, grieves, waits, and gives themselves within relation. The visionary receptive mind is organized primarily around disclosure. Its characteristic event is that something appears, speaks, shows itself, or becomes directly perceptible. The emphasis falls not first upon the receiver's movement toward the sacred, but upon the sacred, or what is experienced as sacred, taking the initiative and entering awareness. The devotional statement is, I love her. The visionary statement is, I saw her. These may arise together, but neither proves the other. Intense devotion may exist without visions, and the absence of visionary experience does not make devotion incomplete. Conversely, a person may possess genuine visionary capacity without mature love, surrender, humility, or relational depth. They may receive images, voices, or presences while remaining fascinated primarily by the experience, their own chosenness, or the authority it appears to confer. This distinction becomes especially important when visionary founders unintentionally make their experiences a measure of devotion. Disciples may conclude that if their love were pure enough, the deity would appear to them in the same way. They begin to treat silence as rejection, ordinary devotion as failure, or the absence of visions as evidence that the relationship is not real. But devotion is not measured by perceptibility. A relationship may be spiritually profound even when the beloved never appears as image, voice, or visible presence. Indeed, the capacity to remain faithful through silence may reveal a depth that repeated apparition does not establish. Vision concerns whether the sacred becomes perceptible. Devotion concerns what kind of relationship the person forms with the sacred, whether perceptible or not. At maturity, the two modes can strengthen one another. Devotion protects vision from becoming spectacle, possession, or status by returning attention from the experience to the one encountered. Vision protects devotion from becoming purely retrospective or imagined by allowing the beloved to appear as living initiative rather than only the object of longing, but the distinction must remain. A vision may awaken devotion without proving its maturity. Devotion may sustain a whole life without ever becoming vision. Unbidden does not necessarily mean external. Yet the opposite conclusion is equally unwarranted, because an experience occurs through consciousness does not prove that consciousness fabricated its object. All perception is mediated. A mountain appears through the visual system, but is not therefore manufactured by the eye. In the same way, sacred reality may become perceptible through imagination, memory, symbol, and inherited form without being reducible to them. The mature question is not simply whether the event occurred inside or outside the person, because that distinction may be too crude. The better question is what kind of reality became present through the experience, what relation it established, and what consequences followed from entering it. Fantasy often constructs a world serving an unmet need of the self: admiration, control, revenge, romance, safety, importance, or escape from ordinary frustration. Visionary disclosure may do the opposite. It may humiliate rather than glorify, expose responsibility rather than grant escape, destroy a desired identity, or confront the receiver with beauty, suffering, or obligation they cannot possess. This resistance to desire can indicate that the experience is more than convenient fantasy, but inconvenience alone proves nothing. Trauma, guilt, aggression, and fear also generate painful material. The deeper difference concerns the structure of transformation. Fantasy tends to protect the existing self through compensation. Mature vision demands that the existing self be reorganized. A genuine encounter can also later be converted into fantasy. The receiver surrounds it with imagined dialogues, heroic interpretations, and stories of election. The revelation becomes the seed around which a compensatory world grows. Discernment must therefore continue after the event rather than being settled once at the moment of reception. It is not merely visual or identical with every dream. The word visionary may mislead because it appears to privilege sight. Receptivity may take the form of a voice, inward music, a sentence arriving whole, a symbolic dream, sudden knowledge, bodily certainty, an unknown presence, an imaginal scene without ordinary sensory location, or a shift in which the visible world itself appears illuminated from within. A person may say, I saw when the whole field of consciousness became perceptive. A quiet but unmistakable presence may be more decisive than a complex visual spectacle, and one inward sentence may transform a life more deeply than hundreds of luminous forms. The mature question is not how vivid the picture was, but what kind of encounter occurred. Dream is one of the oldest vehicles of visionary experience, but not every dream is revelation. Dreams may reflect recent impressions, anxiety, bodily disturbance, wish, unresolved conflict, memory, or random association. Some disappear upon waking, others remain for decades with unusual force, coherence, autonomy, and presence. Even then, intensity does not make the first interpretation infallible. A dream may be spiritually significant without predicting an event. A divine figure may appear without granting public authority. A symbolic death may require transformation rather than literal action. The dream must be honored without being flattened into instruction. It is not reducible to psychosis or dissociation. The presence of a voice, vision, or invisible being does not by itself establish mental illness. Such experiences occur within religious traditions, bereavement, dreams, contemplative practice, ritual states, and otherwise functional lives. Nor does sacred interpretation automatically establish health. The same surface phenomenon may occur within very different human structures. One person may hear a voice while remaining reflective, responsible, ethically stable, connected with shared reality, capable of uncertainty, and free to decide whether to respond. Another may become sleepless, terrified, disorganized, isolated, unable to work, unable to care for themselves, or controlled by commands. The decisive issue lies not merely in the content, but in the organization of life around it. Vision may also interrupt ordinary identity. The receiver may lose awareness of the room, speak in another register, feel taken elsewhere, or experience themselves as acted through by a presence. This resembles dissociation, and sometimes dissociative processes may be involved. Trauma and overwhelming emotion can produce states in which parts of the personality feel autonomous. Yet not every loosening of egoic control is pathological fragmentation. Contemplation, grief, love, music, aesthetic absorption, and ritual can suspend ordinary boundaries without destroying coherence. The relevant question is what follows. Does the state leave greater integration, freedom, and capacity to inhabit life, or increasing division, amnesia, helplessness, and loss of agency? Spiritual life need not gain legitimacy by pretending that genuine visions are merely culturally approved psychological events. It can affirm that a person may encounter sacred reality while acknowledging that visions and voices can accompany psychiatric disturbance. The presence of pathology in some visionary experience does not disprove revelation. The possibility of revelation does not make psychological deterioration sacred. It is not the same as mediumship. Some visionary people understand themselves as receiving messages from spirits, deceased persons, angels, deities, or other beings. This overlaps with the visionary receptive mode, but does not exhaust it. Mediumship emphasizes transmission from a distinct invisible agent. Visionary receptivity is broader and may involve deity, symbolic worlds, impersonal light, dream, geometry, presence, or knowledge whose source remains uncertain. A visionary need not become a channel. Indeed, the channel identity can become dangerous because it encourages displacement of responsibility. These are not my words. The being said it, I am only transmitting. But every message passes through the receiver's memory, language, expectations, and interpretation. Even where the source is accepted as sacred, the human being remains responsible for what is said and done with it. No vessel becomes transparent merely by declaring itself a vessel. It is not proof of spiritual rank. Visionary capacity is not identical with realization. A person may see luminous forms, hear voices, receive dreams, or enter trances while remaining vain, cruel, confused, manipulative, emotionally immature, ethically unreliable, or unable to tolerate ordinary frustration. The gift may be real while the human being remains undeveloped. Conversely, another person may live without visions and embody profound freedom, tenderness, clarity, service, devotion, and non attachment. No hierarchy can be constructed from the vividness of experience alone. This corrects one of the most damaging pressures created by visionary founders. The disciple hears that the teacher saw the goddess, Christ, Krishna, Buddha, or angels, and concludes that spiritual maturity should produce the same phenomenology. The absence of vision becomes evidence of inferiority, or the disciple begins generating and exaggerating experiences to escape that conclusion. Different people are structured through different modes. One receives sacred forms, another possesses unwavering love, another sees through conceptual confusion, another serves, and another gives ritual complete embodiment. The absence of visions does not prove the absence of realization. The presence of visions does not prove its completion. It is not necessarily command or public vocation. A presence may be sacred without every word attributed to it becoming an instruction. A vision may disclose without legislating, and a dream may awaken without authorizing. The receiver may transform an image into a command that was never given. Even a direct imperative must be considered in relation to existing ethical obligations, the dignity and freedom of other people, the possibility of symbolic meaning, the receiver's condition, and the consequences of obedience. Mamani's reported refusal to follow radiant beings who invited her to leave her body is structurally important. However glorious the figures appeared, she did not obey automatically. She tested the invitation against a prior relation of trust and commitment. A luminous apparition does not abolish discernment. The more consequential the instruction, the stricter the test must become. A private invitation to pray is not equivalent to a command affecting another person's body, money, freedom, family, or safety. Once private revelation produces public consequences, it enters the field of ethical accountability. Nor does the intensity of an experience automatically establish a public vocation. The urge to speak may arise from loneliness, fear of forgetting, wish for confirmation, emotional overflow, emerging identity, or genuine responsibility to transmit. These motives are difficult to distinguish immediately. Many visions may have no public task. They may transform one relationship, heal one wound, initiate one path, or disclose one truth privately. That is enough. The receiver does not fail by remaining unknown, and a vision does not become more real by acquiring an audience. The mature question is not how extraordinary the experience was, but who is served by telling it. It is not free from culture or the body. Visionary forms do not appear in a cultural vacuum. A Christian sees Christ, Mary, angels, or saints. A Shakta sees the goddess. A Buddhist may encounter Buddhas, bodhisattvas, gurus, or mandalas. A Sufi may encounter prophets, saints, divine names, or theophanic forms. This does not prove that vision is only cultural construction. It shows that disclosure becomes humanly perceptible through available symbolic languages. Culture gives form to revelation, while revelation may renew and transform the culture. Guruji's visions were recognizably Shravidya while generating forms irreducible to copied iconography. Hildegard's visions emerged through Christian cosmology, yet possessed an unmistakably individual symbolic world. Mamani's experiences unfolded inside Gaudiya Lila while carrying the intimacy of her particular devotional life. The presence of cultural form neither proves nor disproves revelation. It shows that the infinite enters human awareness through language. Vision also occurs through embodied life. Sleep deprivation, fasting, grief, fever, medication, pain, illness, digestion, hormonal change, and neurological conditions affect perception. Acknowledging this does not desecrate the sacred, it is part of humility. Guruji could speak of frightening visions and also consider bodily causes such as food or digestion. This capacity matters. An immature visionary spiritualizes every fluctuation. A mature one can say that an experience may possess spiritual meaning while the body also influences its form and intensity. The nervous system is part of the vessel. Caring for sleep, food, health, and stability is not a concession to materialism, it is responsibility toward the instrument through which revelation arrives. It is not final, merely because it is direct. A direct experience may be more powerful than belief, more immediate than doctrine, and capable of overturning an entire worldview. But directness does not automatically establish ultimacy. The experience still has form, content, a receiver, a beginning, duration, and end. It may be sacred and partial. It may disclose God without exhausting God. It may reveal the goddess in one form without defining all that she is. The mature visionary does not weaken the experience by admitting this. They honor its scope. I saw her is stronger than I imagined something meaningful, but it does not require the claim that everything about her is contained in what was seen. The vision is direct as encounter and partial as revelation, yet the opposite reduction must also be refused. Some contemplative traditions emphasize that every vision appears and disappears and therefore should not be clung to. This is true, but impermanence does not establish insignificance. A sentence, meeting, death, or a moment of love may pass and permanently alter a life. A vision may disappear while leaving certainty, devotion, courage, vocation, symbolic depth, discipline, art, ritual, or a transformed relation to reality. A door need not remain permanently open for a person to cross it. The experience may not be the unchanging ground. It may still reveal the ground with a force no abstraction could achieve. The necessary middle. The visionary receptive mind must live between two dismissals. On one side lies the claim that everything was only imagination, psychology, culture, or bodily disturbance. On the other lies the claim that because an experience was supernatural, every interpretation is true and every command deserves obedience. The first denies too much. The second claims too much. The mature mode can acknowledge mediation without reducing revelation to mediation. It can affirm sacred encounter without making the receiver infallible. It can accept cultural and bodily influence without assuming that these exhaust the event. It can recognize that visions sometimes accompany illness without calling every visionary ill, and that genuine visions occur without treating every unusual state as sacred. Its dignity lies in refusing to purchase seriousness through denial. The visionary need not say that nothing sacred occurred, but the experience was psychologically useful. Nor must they declare that the sacred appeared, and therefore no psychological question is permitted. They can say, something real addressed me through the full complexity of a human consciousness. I must honor the encounter without pretending that my humanity disappeared while receiving it. The mode is not ordinary imagination, compensatory fantasy, pathology, spiritual rank, moral permission, or final realization, yet neither is it merely an immature form of another path. Its dangers arise not because nothing happens, but because something may happen with more force than the receiver knows how to bear. Its mature work begins there, to receive the event without reducing it to nothing or making it everything. The world from within. The visionary receptive mind does not experience consciousness as a sealed interior space populated only by its own thoughts. It experiences consciousness as a threshold. Something may enter, appear, or address the person before the deliberate mind has decided what to believe, imagine, or desire. For this mode, the world is not merely observed, it may disclose itself. The decisive event often arrives as interruption. Ordinary life continues according to familiar laws. The body moves through habitual space, thought follows expected associations, and time proceeds without visible rupture. Then something enters that does not belong to the sequence. A sentence arrives whole, a form appears, a presence fills the room, a dream possesses greater density than waking life, a song heard inwardly acquires the force of communication. A symbolic scene unfolds with an intelligence the conscious mind cannot easily claim. The event may last seconds, its consequences may endure for decades. Before and after. Many spiritual paths develop gradually. Ritual works through repetition, study through accumulated understanding, ethical discipline through countless decisions, contemplation through repeated release of identification. Vision may divide a life in a moment. There is the world before the encounter and the world afterward. The same family, work, room, body, and obligations remain. Yet the old interpretation of reality no longer closes completely. The person has met something that cannot be fitted comfortably into the previous map. They may spend years questioning what happened, searching for theological, psychological, neurological, and symbolic explanations. They may conceal the experience from almost everyone or doubt aspects of their own memory, but they cannot fully return to the innocence of the former worldview. A wall has opened once. Even after it closes, it no longer possesses the same authority. The vision does not merely add another belief, it changes what kind of world the person knows to be possible. Before the encounter, sacred reality may have been inherited language. Afterward, it may become an existential fact, perhaps unverifiable publicly and difficult to explain, but nevertheless a fact around which inner life reorganizes. The force of direct presence. Visionary certainty is rarely intellectual alone. The whole organism may register presence. Breathing changes, time appears suspended, the body becomes still, and the distinction between inner and outer may weaken. The person may experience bliss, terror, tenderness, exposure, awe, intimacy, or a certainty without emotional excitement. The event can possess a density greater than ordinary perception. Conventional language assumes that waking sensory life supplies the standard of reality, so the receiver says the experience was like seeing or as if someone were present. Yet from inside the event, the comparison may reverse. Ordinary life may appear less real than the vision. Much of waking life passes through distraction and habitual categorization. A visionary encounter may arrive with concentrated presence in which nothing is peripheral or casual. This is why the receiver may speak with extraordinary simplicity afterward. I saw her. Rhetorical decoration is unnecessary because certainty precedes language. Yet the same density creates disproportion. What feels more real than ordinary life may be granted more authority than every other source of knowledge. Because the encounter was overwhelming, the receiver assumes that its interpretation must also be exact. The visionary world therefore contains revelation and danger from the beginning. The sacred as other and intimate. Visionary experience often carries a quality of otherness. The form does not feel like an extension of the familiar personality. It may possess its own gaze, intelligence, mood, rhythm, intention, and freedom. The person may feel seen rather than merely seeing. This reversal is central. Ordinary perception places the ego in the position of observer and the world before it as object. Vision may reverse the relation. I am the one observed, I am the one addressed, I have entered a field whose center is not myself. This can be profoundly liberating. The ego discovers that it is not the sole source of significance. Reality is no longer passive matter awaiting interpretation. It may approach, refuse, reveal one thing, conceal another, and disappear without permission. The sacred other cannot be possessed merely because it has become perceptible. At maturity, however, otherness need not harden into absolute metaphysical separation. It becomes relation. The goddess may appear before the receiver without becoming an external object entirely outside consciousness. The visionary may inhabit a paradox without solving it conceptually. She was other than me and nearer than anything I ordinarily call myself. Symbolic permeability. Once reality has disclosed itself through one form, other forms may become newly transparent. An image may seem to look back. Mantra may cease to be repeated sound and become the audible body of a presence. A landscape may acquire sacred atmosphere. A geometrical form may appear as living intelligence. A dream may carry a density ordinary events lack. A song heard at a precise moment may become the vehicle through which transformation enters consciousness. The visionary receptive mind perceives that meaning is not always imposed upon the world by interpretation. Sometimes meaning appears to arise from within the form itself. The world becomes symbolically permeable. This does not mean the mature visionary treats everything as a message. That is the shadow. Healthy receptivity recognizes that some events possess significance not exhausted by ordinary causal explanation. A song can be produced mechanically, remembered neurologically, and still become the exact form through which something decisive is received. A dream can emerge through psychic processes and disclose what the waking ego did not know. A deity form can belong to a cultural tradition and become the vehicle of a living sacred encounter. Symbolic mediation does not make the event unreal. It may be the condition that makes reception possible. Human consciousness does not receive the infinite without form. It receives through image, body, relation, story, rhythm, and inherited language. The visionary world is not less real because it is symbolic. Its reality may lie precisely in the power of symbol to make otherwise inaccessible depth perceptible. A world that speaks. The visionary mode often experiences reality as communicative. A presence does not merely appear but means something. A dream addresses, an image calls for response. Communication may occur through explicit words, but also through gesture, atmosphere, beauty, terror, or a symbolic scene understood before it can be explained. Meaning may be given as a whole while language breaks it into pieces. This is why visionary testimony often turns toward poetry, music, theology, geometry, ritual, visual art, or narrative. Discursive explanation alone cannot carry what occurred. The sacred world speaks in more than concepts. Yet the experience of being addressed can generate a subtle distortion. If reality speaks, perhaps it speaks constantly and primarily to me. A chance encounter becomes arranged, a delay becomes a test, a number becomes instruction, another person's behavior becomes a symbol in the receiver's private drama. Symbolic permeability becomes symbolic totalization. The mature visionary must preserve a difficult truth. Reality may address me without being organized around me. A coincidence may carry meaning without proving that contingency has disappeared. Other people remain independent beings with their own motives, wounds, freedom, and paths. They are not merely messengers, enemies, tests, confirmations, or figures placed inside the visionary story. The world may speak. It does not cease to exist apart from the receiver. Beauty and terror. The visionary mind often encounters beauty not merely as pleasure, but as disclosure. A divine face, body, color, sound, landscape, mandala, or movement may appear with unbearable authority as though reality had revealed its hidden perfection. Beauty becomes a mode of knowledge. Guruji Amritananda's descriptions of the goddess belong here. The forms were not respectable abstractions. They were intensely beautiful, erotic, provocative, and alive. The visionary field later opened into endlessly changing expressions of creative perfection beyond his ability to reproduce. For the visionary mind, beauty is not decoration around metaphysical truth. It may be truth's mode of arrival. The form attracts consciousness beyond its ordinary limits, awakening longing, reverence, delight, and the wish to serve or embody what was seen. Beauty also carries danger. The receiver may become addicted to luminous states, confuse aesthetic intensity with spiritual height, or seek increasingly spectacular forms because ordinary beauty no longer satisfies. Desire activated within a sacred encounter may be granted divine authority merely because it arose there. Mature receptivity receives beauty without claiming possession over what beauty awakens. The sacred may also arrive through terror. Visionary traditions contain wrathful beings, destruction, judgment, dismemberment, death, catastrophe, and experiences of absolute fear. These may be interpreted as confrontation with mortality, destruction of identity, trauma, karmic residue, bodily disturbance, hostile forces, or divine power. The receiver may not know immediately which interpretation is correct. Guruji's ability not to force all frightening visions into one explanation is valuable. Some might relate to past formations, some might need to be endured, and some might be influenced by digestion or inappropriate food. This freedom from compulsory interpretation is a sign of strength. A frightened visionary may become desperate to explain. Every disturbing image becomes prophecy, attack, or invisible warfare. Explanation restores temporary control while producing an increasingly persecutory universe. The mature receiver can sometimes say, I do not yet know what this was. Terror may disclose something real. It may also reveal the limits of the vessel. Both require attention. The wound of non transferability. One of the deepest difficulties of the mode is that the experience cannot be handed directly to another person. The receiver says that she was there, but the listener receives only words. The event may be the most important fact of the person's life and remain nearly impossible to communicate without distortion. Some listeners dismiss it, others idealize it, some demand detail, diagnose the receiver, project theology upon the experience, or believe too quickly and turn the person into an authority. The visionary may learn that silence preserves the event better than explanation. Not every encounter survives exposure to the public. Language may make what was intimate appear theatrical. Repeated narration can harden living mystery into a polished story. The receiver begins telling the experience as others expect to hear it. The vision becomes biography, biography becomes identity, and identity begins reshaping memory. Privacy is therefore more than protection from ridicule. It preserves the unfinished relation between the receiver and what appeared. The experience is allowed to continue working before it becomes social property. Appearance, withdrawal, and longing. After a powerful vision ends, ordinary life may feel diminished. The room returns, the body becomes heavy, time resumes, and the person must eat, work, answer questions, and live among those who do not know that reality has just opened. The longing for return is natural. It may express devotion and love for a presence that withdrew. It may also become dependence. Prayer without vision feels empty. Ritual without presence seems mechanical. Ordinary consciousness becomes a waiting room between revelations. The receiver intensifies practice, sacrifices sleep, fasts excessively, pursues altered states, or interprets ambiguous impressions as the sacred's return. The gift becomes the beginning of compulsion. The visionary world is therefore shaped by absence as much as appearance. What happens after the encounter may matter more than the encounter itself. Can the person remain faithful without renewed confirmation? Can they continue loving what no longer appears? Can ordinary life become the place in which revelation is embodied rather than the inferior condition into which they have fallen? The mature visionary eventually learns that disappearance is not necessarily abandonment. The vision may have completed its immediate work. Withdrawal may begin assimilation. Interpretation and the coexistence of worlds. A visionary event rarely arrives with a complete manual. Even explicit words require interpretation. Who spoke? Was the language literal or symbolic? Was the message personal or universal? Was it consolation, correction, prophecy, or invitation? What belongs to the event and what was added afterward? The mind begins interpreting almost immediately. Memory reorganizes. Existing theology supplies names. Later events strengthen one meaning and weaken another. The vision gradually becomes a story, and this is unavoidable because an experience never entering interpretation cannot become part of a life. Yet the receiver must distinguish what was seen, what they think it meant, and what they later concluded it requires. These may be related, but are not identical. Certainty is usually strongest at the first level and most vulnerable at the third. The mature visionary therefore lives not only with openness, but with patience. Some visions may continue disclosing their meaning for the rest of a life. They also live between two worlds. There is the shared world of work, family, money, history, health, practical causality, and ordinary conversation. There is also the disclosed world of deity, Laila, dream, imaginal geography, sacred correspondence, invisible relation, and living symbol. The immature response is to choose one and deny the other. The skeptic reduces the disclosed world to psychological noise. The inflated visionary reduces the shared world to a lower illusion or stage arranged around revelation. Maturity requires double fidelity. The sacred world must not be denied merely because it cannot be publicly measured. Ordinary reality must not be neglected because it appears less luminous. The visionary must care for the body, honor obligations, respect others' perceptions, and remain within history without betraying what was seen. Revelation enters the world only through someone willing to remain in the world. The intimate world of Lawala. In some visionary devotional configurations, sacred reality does not appear only in isolated events. It becomes a continuing relational environment. Mamani's testimony belongs to this form. The house becomes part of Vraja. Gopala is experienced as a living child, and divine figures converse, play, instruct, and move through scenes felt as immediate reality. This is more than a series of apparitions. It is participation in Lala. Theology becomes event. Devotional imagination becomes perceived relation. Remembered scripture becomes present sacred life. From the visionary devotional perspective, this may represent consummation. Divine play is no longer read about or contemplated from afar, but entered. Yet the intensity sharpens the question of proportion. When the sacred world becomes more experientially dominant than ordinary life, has the person entered deeper reality or become enclosed within a private world? Different modes answer differently. The visionary and devotional minds may see fulfillment. The subtractive mind sees seer, seeing, and seen. The clinical observer sees a sustained, alternate experiential field. The integrative mind must preserve the distinctions and judge the whole life, rather than allowing one vocabulary to erase the others. Mamani's case resists an easy conclusion precisely because the visionary world appears to have deepened devotion, humility, practice, and testimony rather than ambition and control. The question cannot be settled only by how continuous or extraordinary the experiences became. One must ask what kind of person lived through them. The need for a vessel. Visionary intensity is not enough. The experience requires a vessel. Without symbolic language, ethical structure, discipline, bodily care, preparation, community, and some relation to tradition or trusted guidance, the receiver may be overwhelmed by what appears. The vision may exceed the personality's capacity to interpret and embody it. The person becomes frightened, inflated, fragmented, or socially isolated. The stronger the experience, the greater the need for form. Guruji's visions entered a mind shaped by science, ritual, initiation, lineage, and architectural intelligence. Ramakrishna's trances unfolded inside profound devotion and the dense sacred world of Bengal. Mamani's Lila Darshana followed decades of nama and bhajana. Jigme Lingpa's revelation entered Buddhist contemplative, textual, and lineage structures. The vessel did not necessarily create the revelation. It made revelation bearable and transmissible. A river without banks does not become more free. It becomes a flood. The visionary mode therefore needs disciplines less spectacular than vision itself. Sleep, food, study, repetition, ethical limits, ordinary responsibility, community, silence, patience, and the ability to doubt one's interpretation. These do not diminish the sacred force. They prevent it from destroying the life through which it seeks embodiment. The secret transformation. The deepest visionary fruit may remain invisible. The person may never publish the experience, become a teacher, establish a community, or create public work. No one may know what occurred. Yet the encounter may change how they treat others, what they fear, what they can endure, how they understand death, how they perceive beauty, whether the world feels abandoned, and what kind of life they are willing to live. Public consequence is not the only proof of maturity. History records founders and dramatic biographies, but many sacred encounters may disappear into ordinary lives. Someone sees, hears, or knows something, tells almost no one, and lives differently afterward. That may be enough. The vision does not fail because it remains private. Its function may have been to open one human world from within. To inhabit the visionary receptive mode is therefore to know that reality may exceed its ordinary presentation. The receiver cannot compel the opening, always understand it, transfer it intact, or guarantee that what arrives will be beautiful. They may carry a certainty that cannot become proof and spend the rest of life learning how to remain proportionate to it. Consciousness is not only a mirror, it may be a threshold. Symbol is not only representation, it may become presence. Imagination is not only invention, it may become an organ of reception. The sacred is not only believed or sought, it may approach. The mature visionary does not live permanently inside spectacle. They live within the possibility of disclosure. They know that the world may open, and that when it does, the greater task begins after it closes. The central operation and mature fruit. The visionary receptive mind does not reach maturity by receiving more extraordinary experiences. Its central operation is more demanding. It must receive what exceeds the deliberate self and give it a form that life can bear. The experience may arrive in a moment. Embodiment may require decades. A vision can rupture the old world immediately without creating a mature person. It may confer certainty, beauty, direction, or vocation before the receiver possesses the capacities needed to interpret what occurred. The real work begins after the opening. What was received must be contained without being suppressed, interpreted without being exhausted, embodied without being appropriated, and eventually released from the demand that it appear again. This distinguishes having a visionary experience from becoming a mature visionary. The immature receiver remains organized around the event. Something extraordinary happened to me. The mature receiver becomes organized around what the event asks. What must now become true in my life? The revelation ceases to function primarily as memory, credential, or source of intensity. It becomes responsibility. From apparition to assimilation. A mature visionary arc may move through interruption, recognition, containment, interpretation, embodiment, withdrawal, silence, assimilation, and fidelity without renewed apparition. These stages are not always linear, meaning changes, embodiment, may begin before conceptual understanding, and the event may return after years of silence. Yet the general direction matters. At first, the sacred is encountered as an event standing before the receiver. Later, the event must become an enduring structure within the life. The vision first says, see, then attend, then understand what you can, then build, serve, love, change, preserve, or endure. Finally, it may say nothing. The receiver must continue without repeated confirmation. The deepest movement of the mode is from apparition to assimilation. A vision remaining only an event may become a treasured memory. A vision assimilated changes the source from which the person lives. Containment before proclamation. The first mature response to a powerful vision may not be expression but containment. The event feels too intense for ordinary privacy, and telling it promises relief, confirmation, companionship, and protection from doubt. Yet public speech changes the experience. Once told, the event enters a social field. Others respond with belief, admiration, skepticism, ridicule, fear, or curiosity. The receiver begins explaining. Explanation hardens interpretation. The story acquires a beginning, climax, and meaning. Every repetition makes one version more fixed. An event originally exceeding identity becomes the foundation of a new identity. I am the one to whom this happened. Silence can prevent this premature crystallization. The receiver may record the experience privately, preserve details, and allow its force to settle before deciding what it proves. This is not suppression. Suppression says that the event must not have happened. Containment says that something happened whose meaning is not yet ready for public definition. A contained revelation remains alive. It can deepen without becoming performance, challenge the receiver without requiring defense before an audience, and reveal whether its sacredness survives without social recognition. One of the strongest tests is, would this experience remain sacred if nobody ever knew that I received it? Privacy protects both revelation and receiver. It protects the experience from reduction to claim, spectacle, pathology, or advertisement. It protects the person from inflation. No one grants status, seeks guidance, or organizes around their invisible access. The revelation must justify itself through transformation rather than attention. Yet privacy is not an absolute law. Some revelations carry work beyond the receiver. Guruji's visions were inseparable from forms that became iconography, ritual, and temple. Mamani initially kept her experiences private and later preserved them as testimony. Hildegard resisted public expression until the task became impossible to refuse. The mature distinction is not between secrecy and publicity, but between transmission and self-display. A revelation may need a public body. It does not need a public ego. The right to speak. The urge to tell is not identical with the right to tell. A vision may concern only the receiver, contain symbols whose public interpretation would mislead, involve other people whose dignity requires privacy, or need years before its significance becomes clear. It may also carry a practice, warning, artistic form, teaching, or responsibility intended for others. The receiver must differentiate what belongs to the encounter, what belongs to personal interpretation, what can be shared without demanding belief, and what must remain within the sacred relationship. Even when a revelation should be communicated, the experience itself may not be the most important thing to transmit. The fruit may matter more than the credential. A person can communicate a practice, ethical insight, form of beauty, way of prayer, work of art, community, temple, or transformed quality of presence without repeatedly saying, "Believe this because I saw it." The mature visionary allows the fruit to carry its own truth. Hermeneutic patience. Revelation may be immediate. Its meaning rarely is. The mind naturally asks who appeared, why now, what was intended, what action must follow, what the event proves about the path, and what it reveals about the receiver. The questions are legitimate. The danger lies in answering too quickly. A vision may contain more than the present personality can understand. A symbol may unfold across years. A message that appears literal may reveal psychological, relational, theological, or symbolic depth later. The receiver may recognize the sacred source with certainty while remaining uncertain about the function of the encounter. A person may know whom they met without understanding everything the meeting means. The mature visionary can say, "I know this encounter was real. I know it was sacred. I do not yet know its whole significance." This preserves certainty and humility without reducing one to the other. The reductive mind says that because interpretation cannot be proven, the reality of encounter must be suspended. The inflated mind says that because the encounter was real, the entire interpretation is infallible. Hermeneutic patience rejects both. The revelation is allowed to remain greater than the present explanation. Not every symbol becomes doctrine, not every silence is filled, and not every unassimilated remainder is treated as failure. The visionary must distinguish several layers easily fused together: certainty that the experience occurred, possible certainty that it was sacred, interpretation of what appeared, conclusion about what it asks, decision concerning action, and judgment about whether it concerns anyone else. These layers may support one another, but they do not become identical because the first two carry overwhelming force. A receiver may truthfully say, "I saw the goddess," and still be wrong in concluding that they were appointed to direct particular people, that every desire awakened in them carries divine approval, that the scene predicts a literal event, or that others must accept the form in which she appeared, do not transfer the full certainty of encounter into every human conclusion drawn from it. This discipline permits bold testimony without uncorrectable authority, receiving without appropriation. Every profound vision creates the possibility of chosenness. The receiver naturally asks why the event came to them. The question may have a genuine answer, a particular temperament, vocation, symbolic capacity, or task. Yet the mind easily transforms function into superiority. I received what others cannot receive. Therefore, I am more advanced. I possess special access. My perceptions deserve greater authority. My life belongs to a higher order. Revelation becomes rank. Mature reception moves differently. The person becomes less interested in why they were selected and more attentive to what the gift requires. Election becomes burden rather than privilege, stewardship rather than ownership, responsibility rather than specialness. The experience did not originate in the deliberate ego. Therefore, the ego has the least right to wear it as personal achievement. A visionary may have prepared through decades of practice, but preparation does not manufacture grace. They may become worthy of trust through what they do afterward, while the vision itself cannot become a medal. The mature receiver can say, I saw her, without silently adding, therefore I am greater than those who did not. From status to vocation. Revelation matures when it becomes vocation. The immature question asks what the experience reveals about one's spiritual identity. The mature question asks what work has now become unavoidable. A vision may call a person to create, teach, protect, reform, write, build, pray, preserve, heal, endure a difficult truth, transform one relationship, or live with greater honesty. The scale does not determine authenticity. A public temple may arise from revelation, so may a private decision never again to betray conscience. The sacred does not measure vocation by visibility. Its mature fruit is fidelity. Guruji Amritananda's visions became decades of labor. Temple and iconography did not emerge from enthusiasm alone. They required design, collaboration, money, administration, conflict, correction, and physical work. Revelation acquired resistance. It had to enter matter. This is crucial because a private vision remains relatively free from contradiction. Within memory, it can preserve perfection. Embodiment exposes it to limits. Stone does not behave like luminous form. Artists reproduce imperfectly, communities disagree, institutions create burdens, words fail, bodies age. The mature visionary does not interpret resistance as betrayal of revelation. Sacred form entering history must become partial. Embodiment is not the perfect reproduction of what was seen. It is the creation of a vessel adequate enough to carry something of its force. Revelation, becoming form. The receiver must discover the form proper to the experience. Not every revelation should become teaching, art, community, or institution. Its embodiment depends upon both the disclosure and the capacities of the person. In Ramakrishna, revelation became living presence. His speech, humor, trances, personality, and relationships formed the primary vessel. In Guruji, it became geometry, iconography, ritual, and temple. In Mamani, it became continuous Laila participation and testimony. In Jigme Lingpa, it became text, contemplative practice, and lineage. In Hildegard, it became theology, music, image, and prophetic speech. In Black Elk, it became sacred narrative and communal responsibility. The revelation is not separable from the medium through which it enters the world. The sacred may be the source, but the human configuration shapes expression. This does not automatically corrupt the event. Translation is necessary. A luminous form cannot become temple without geometry and craft. A divine relationship cannot become testimony without narrative. A revelation cannot become public without language. Every form reveals and limits. The task is not perfect reproduction but faithful mediation. Translation without replication. One of the greatest mature fruits of the mode is the capacity to transmit revelation without demanding that others reproduce its phenomenology. The founder saw, the disciple may not see. This does not mean the transmission failed. The disciple may enter through devotion, ritual understanding, service, contemplation, ethics, art, or another form of direct encounter. A visionary founder becomes dangerous when their experience is silently presented as the standard every sincere follower must attain. Disciples then force similar experiences or accept permanent inferiority. Mature transmission says, "You do not need to see exactly what I saw in order to enter what was revealed." Ramakrishna's certainty awakened Vivekananda, but Vivekananda did not need to become another ecstatic Bengali temple mystic. The revelation entered him through a different configuration and became synthesis, public teaching, service, and institution. That is successful transmission. A true visionary does not create a community of failed visionaries. They open a sacred world spacious enough for different faculties to mature. The revelation remains particular in origin and plural in fruit. Vision as renewal. Visionary receptivity can renew traditions whose forms have become spiritually exhausted. Ritual may continue after its originating encounter is forgotten. Doctrine may remain correct while no longer carrying living force. Scripture may be repeated as inherited authority without reopening the reality it records. The visionary restores immediacy. They do not necessarily reject the tradition, they see into it again. An inherited deity form becomes presence. A familiar symbol reveals forgotten depth, and a sacred narrative ceases to belong only to the past. But renewal does not justify unlimited innovation. A private experience may misunderstand the tradition it claims to revive. The mature relationship is reciprocal. Tradition gives revelation language, comparison, memory, discipline, and boundaries. Vision gives tradition renewed life. Without vision, tradition risks preservation without encounter. Without tradition, vision risks encounter without memory or discrimination. The body, return, and ordinary discipline. Visionary maturity includes respect for the body. The experience may feel beyond embodiment, yet it passes through a nervous system. Sleep, food, illness, pain, fasting, grief, medication, and exhaustion affect the field. A receiver who refuses bodily explanation entirely spiritualizes every fluctuation. One who reduces everything to physiology loses the sacred dimension. The mature position can hold both. Caring for the body does not insult revelation. Sleep may be more responsible than forcing another night of opening. Food and medication may matter. Physical illness may influence imagery without invalidating everything the person has experienced. The vessel deserves care precisely because the force passing through it may be great. The visionary's freedom is also measured by the capacity to return. The person must move from extraordinary perception into ordinary time without treating return as exile. They eat, speak with those who did not share the event, care for dependents, work, answer practical questions, and tolerate routine. This is not betrayal, it is embodiment. A person who can open but cannot close becomes psychically exposed and dependent upon altered states. One who can close but never reopen becomes defended. Mature receptivity includes rhythm, opening, receiving, returning, assimilating, living. The door need not remain permanently open. The sacred does not cease to exist when ordinary consciousness resumes. After overwhelming encounter, repetition may appear inferior. Why repeat mantra when the goddess has appeared? Why study or perform ritual after direct presence? Yet ordinary discipline is one of the strongest protections of the mode. Practice stabilizes what intensity cannot preserve. Vision opens, practice integrates. Revelation interrupts, discipline gives continuity. Grace discloses, labor gives disclosure a body. Mamani's visionary life remained joined to nama, bhajana, and puja. Ramakrishna returned continually to devotional forms. Guruji's visions became ritual structures rather than replacing ritual. Jigme Lingpa's revelations became practices repeated by generations. Vision may reveal the summit. Discipline creates a path between the summit and the rest of life. The capacity to endure silence. Eventually, the field may close. The form no longer appears, the voice falls silent, dreams lose revelatory force, and meditation becomes ordinary. This is one of the greatest trials because the visionary has known direct confirmation. The absence may feel like abandonment. The receiver wonders whether grace has been lost, whether they failed, whether the experience was ever real, or whether the sacred withdrew because they became unworthy. The immature response attempts to force return. Practice becomes compulsive. Every dream is searched, every coincidence magnified, every ambiguous impression treated as a sign. The person becomes dependent upon ontological reassurance. The mature visionary permits silence. They continue the work already given and allow the relationship to change form. Silence reveals what they actually loved, the sacred, or the experience of being visibly addressed by it. While visions continue, these are easily confused. Silence separates them. The receiver is no longer confirmed as exceptional. No message proves importance. What remains? Devotion, service, steadiness, character, the work, and the life already transformed. This is where revelation moves from event into ground. Guruji Amritananda's account offers a clear example. The visionary phase connected with the temple ended. The goddess no longer appeared in the same way, yet his spiritual stance did not collapse. He did not abandon the work, become bitter, or manufacture visions to preserve identity. The relationship deepened without continuous apparition. The vision had accomplished its initial task. It had generated temple, ritual, iconography, teaching, and community. The receiver no longer needed to remain primarily the one before whom the goddess appeared. He could become the bearer of what had already been disclosed. The vision disappeared without destroying the world it revealed. At first, she appeared. Later, the life formed by her appearance became where she remained. The cessation of vision is not necessarily diminishment, it may be completion. The mature visionary presence. The mature visionary no longer needs continuous reassurance that reality is meaningful. They do not require a sign to know that the path continues, nor another experience to prove the relationship is real. They practice because the encounter revealed a truth worth living, not because practice must force another encounter. At first, certainty depends on perceptible presence. I know because she is here. Later, certainty becomes embodied. I live from what was disclosed even when she is not perceptibly here. The vision becomes character, the message becomes work, the encounter becomes symbolic depth, the extraordinary becomes less separable from the quality of ordinary life. The mature person may speak less dramatically than the immature visionary. There is less urgency, proclamation, and need to interpret every event. They become easier to live with. They listen, admit error, care for the body, keep ordinary commitments, preserve humor, respect people without visions, and remain faithful through silence. The central movement can therefore be stated simply: first, reality opens, then the receiver learns to carry what entered. Finally, the life becomes the enduring form of the revelation. Distortion and self-sealing. The visionary-receptive mind becomes dangerous not because nothing happened, but because something may have happened with more force than the receiver knows how to bear. A weak experience rarely reorganizes an identity, a powerful one can. The person may have encountered something genuinely sacred, psychologically autonomous, symbolically profound, or impossible to reduce to deliberate imagination. Yet the force of encounter does not automatically supply the discrimination, humility, ethical maturity, or relational stability needed to interpret it. This is what makes the shadow unusually dangerous. The distortion may grow around a genuine core. The receiver is not necessarily fabricating everything. They may be protecting something true through conclusions that become increasingly false. The full movement proceeds gradually. Unbidden experience becomes assumed external source. Source becomes complete truth. Truth becomes perfect interpretation. Interpretation becomes moral authority. Authority becomes personal election. Election becomes collective submission. Each step feels natural from within the previous one. Together, they create one of the most powerful self-sealing structures in spiritual life. From encounter to total certainty. The receiver correctly knows that they did not consciously manufacture the event. The mind then moves farther. Therefore, it came from an independent spiritual being. Therefore, that being is exactly who I believe it to be. Therefore, the message means what I first think it means. Therefore, the application is obvious. Therefore, disagreement is resistance to the sacred. Distinct layers collapse into one block of certainty. The person then experiences correction as an attack upon the encounter itself. A question about interpretation feels like denial that anything occurred. A disagreement concerning conduct feels like rejection of the sacred source. Conversation becomes nearly impossible because the receiver is defending not merely a conclusion, but the reality around which the entire life has reorganized. Mature discernment separates the layers. Distorted certainty fuses them. Intensity mistaken for truth. Visionary experience often carries extraordinary emotional and bodily force. The receiver trembles, weeps, enters trance, encounters unbearable beauty, experiences timelessness, or possesses certainty stronger than ordinary perception. Intensity naturally appears to authenticate content. How could something feel this real and not be true? But intensity establishes intensity. It proves that the event had immense force for the person. It does not prove the source, interpretation, literal meaning, or consequences. Dream, trauma, psychedelic experience, neurological disturbance, ecstatic worship, panic, and divine encounter can all carry overwhelming force. Their intensity does not make them equivalent. It makes intensity an insufficient criterion. The receiver may say that outsiders were not there and cannot understand. This may be true. It may also become a method of excluding every corrective voice. The event's force becomes an argument no one else is permitted to examine. The transfer of sacred authority. The most dangerous movement occurs when the authority of the sacred passes into the authority of the receiver. The person no longer says only that the goddess appeared. They speak as though the appearance establishes the authority of everything they now say. A subtle fusion develops. I was addressed by the sacred. Therefore, I represent the sacred. Therefore, resistance to me is resistance to her. The receiver's personal desire, interpretation, and administrative judgment acquire divine protection. The human vessel disappears rhetorically while gaining extraordinary power practically. The language of instrumentality intensifies this danger. I am only a channel sounds humble, yet can abolish accountability. If the words belong entirely to the deity, the receiver is no longer responsible for error, contradiction, or harm. But being an instrument does not make the instrument transparent. Mature visionary authority says, I received this, and I remain responsible for how I understand and enact it. Distorted authority says, I received this, therefore responsibility belongs to the source. Revelation becoming identity. An extraordinary encounter naturally reorganizes self-understanding. The person may feel that their previous identity no longer explains the life. This can be genuine transformation. Yet the new identity may organize itself around exceptionality. Chosen one, messenger, seer, initiate, bearer of a cosmic role, or person with access others lack. The experience becomes not merely something received, but the answer to who the person is. Identity then reshapes attention. Events supporting the role are remembered, those challenging it minimized, and later experience interpreted through the established persona. Childhood episodes become signs, failures become initiations, opponents become archetypal enemies, and relationships become scenes within the mission. This need not involve deliberate deception. Identity selects evidence, memory strengthens what fits, and imagination supplies continuity. The person gradually inhabits a self-confirming biography. The original revelation broke the old personality open. The visionary persona closes around it. The intoxication of chosenness. The question, why me, may produce gratitude, responsibility, and humility. It may also become narcotic. The receiver may speak in the language of unworthiness while secretly experiencing extraordinary superiority. I am nothing, yet the goddess chose me. Humility and election reinforce one another. The smaller the person claims to be, the more astonishing the choice appears. Chosenness may compensate for wounds of insignificance, rejection, invisibility, or failure. A genuine encounter does not automatically heal these structures. It may instead be recruited by them. A person can possess authentic visionary capacity while remaining vain, impulsive, manipulative, frightened, or dependent upon admiration. The distortion begins when one gift becomes proof of total maturity. The mature receiver experiences the gift as responsibility. The inflated receiver experiences it as rank. Revelation as moral permission. Sacred encounter may awaken enormous force. Desire, sexuality, aggression, creativity, and ambition intensify. The receiver feels that ordinary moral categories are too small for what has been disclosed. This becomes particularly dangerous in traditions valuing transgression, divine freedom, antinomianism, or the union of opposites. The person moves from the sacred exceeds conventional limitation to therefore my desires express sacred freedom. But beyond convention can easily become beyond accountability. A genuine encounter does not make every desire awakened afterward divine. The sacred source and the receiver's later impulses remain distinguishable. No vision abolishes consent, consequence, vulnerability, or the independent reality of another person. Mature revelation increases accountability. Distorted revelation creates exemption. The personally orchestrated world. Once reality is experienced as capable of address, ordinary events may appear charged with intention. A coincidence carries meaning. A meeting seems timely. A dream illuminates a decision, and the world no longer appears dead. This can be spiritually fertile. It can also become causal saturation. Everything happens for a reason specifically connected with the receiver. A delay is a test. Success confirms the mission. Failure proves the greatness of opposition. Criticism reveals hostile forces. Silence demonstrates that faith is being examined. No outcome counts against the interpretation. The world becomes meaningful at the cost of becoming impossible to correct. The gift of symbolic permeability then becomes symbolic totalization. Other people cease to exist fully in their own right and become messengers, karmic figures, temptations, mirrors, enemies, initiators, betrayers, archetypes, or confirmations. The visionary may believe they see others more deeply than those people see themselves. Sometimes intuition may contain truth, yet the interpretation can also erase the other's freedom to describe their own motives, refuse the assigned role, or leave the relationship without being spiritually degraded in the visionary's story. A sacred world that consumes the independent reality of other people has become a private empire. The rejection of ordinary causality. Visionary consciousness may become suspicious of ordinary explanations. A bodily symptom cannot simply be illness, it must be energy, attack, purification, or spiritual transformation. A relationship fails not through incompatibility or harm, but because cosmic forces opposed it. A project collapses not because of weak planning, but because the world was unready. A follower leaves not because they were mistreated, but because they rejected grace. Sacred and ordinary explanations need not exclude one another. A dream may carry spiritual meaning and be influenced by illness. A vision may guide a project, while the project fails through poor administration. A relationship may contain symbolic depth and remain practically destructive. The distorted visionary protects the sacred explanation by excluding ordinary causality. The mature one does not need the sacred to compete with reality. Dependence and forcing the door. After overwhelming encounter, ordinary consciousness may feel flat. Longing for return begins as devotion and becomes dependency. The receiver measures spiritual worth through frequency and intensity. Silent meditation feels empty, dreamless sleep abandoned, ritual without apparition mechanical, and psychological stability spiritually mediocre. Another vision is required to prove that the relationship, mission, and identity remain real. This is the visionary equivalent of ritual quantity. The ritualist counts repetitions. The visionary counts openings. Both may avoid asking what has become stable in life. Because disclosure cannot always be manufactured, dependence may lead to forcing the door through exhaustion, excessive fasting, extreme breath work, obsessive prayer, substances, or other destabilizing practices. Deliberately induced states are not automatically false. Religious traditions have always used techniques altering consciousness. The danger lies in making access itself the goal. Not every opening is meaningful. Not every voice is wise. Not every presence deserves trust. Mature receptivity includes the capacity to close. Distorted receptivity treats every boundary as spiritual obstruction. Terror becoming invisible. Warfare. Frightening visions produce a powerful need for explanation. Terror is interpreted as hostile entities, attack, curses, dark forces, or cosmic opposition. Within some traditions, such interpretations may be meaningful. The danger begins when every fear confirms persecution. Anxiety becomes attack, criticism, demonic interference. illness warfare, and ordinary disagreement, evidence that invisible powers recognize the receiver's importance. The person becomes the center of an enormous unseen conflict. The experience may possess spiritual significance. It may also be shaped by trauma, illness, exhaustion, or fear. One explanation need not erase the others. The capacity to say, I do not know, is especially important here. Without it, terror becomes cosmology. Revelation as defense against grief. Visionary meaning can protect people from despair. Loss becomes part of a greater story. A wound reveals vocation, and an apparently meaningless event acquires symbolic depth. This can be deeply healing. Meaning may also become a defense against realities that must first be endured: senseless loss, helplessness, loneliness, contingency, ordinary failure, and the absence of explanation. The person cannot grieve because everything must immediately reveal divine purpose. Mature visionary life does not need revelation to rescue it instantly from human pain. It can admit that it does not know why something happened. This does not betray the sacred. It protects sacred meaning from being used to erase suffering. The founder's gift as an impossible standard. A visionary founder's public testimony creates an unavoidable asymmetry. The founder says the goddess appeared, the form was shown, or the instruction was received. The disciple practices for years without comparable experience. The founder's vocation becomes a silent, universal standard. The disciple concludes that if the path were alive in them, they would see the same things. They force experiences, embellish dreams, imitate the founder's language, or accept permanent inferiority. A healthy tradition must state clearly that the founder's revelation may belong to the founder's function rather than every disciple's promised future. The disciple need not reproduce the founder's phenomenology to enter what was disclosed. A revelation may be transmitted through devotion, service, understanding, ritual, contemplation, or ethical life. A true founder opens a world. They do not demand replicas of their nervous system. The economy of invisible access. Once visionary experience carries status, a community develops a revelation economy. People learn which claims receive attention. One reports a dream, another a direct message, another contact with the deceased founder, another a secret instruction. Invisible access becomes competitive. Status depends upon who receives the clearest communication, who is closest to this subtle presence, and whose experience confirms leadership. Members begin producing the kinds of narratives rewarded by the group. This may develop around an authentic founder because the problem is structural. Human beings desire participation in the founder's immediacy. If no other mode of maturity receives equal dignity, visionary claims become the shortest route to belonging and authority. Communities may then control which visions are legitimate. Experiences confirming doctrine and leadership are accepted. Those challenging authority are attributed to ego, illusion, or hostile influence. Discernment becomes political control disguised as spiritual judgment. Criteria for discernment are necessary. The problem is whether they remain intellectually and ethically visible or simply validate the institution itself. Secrecy becoming immunity. Privacy can protect revelation from inflation. It can also protect power from accountability. A leader claims that the instruction is too sacred to disclose, that others lack qualification, or that the deity forbids explanation, while the secret revelation directs other people's bodies, money, relationships, loyalties, and futures. The experience remains private. Its consequences become public. No one is required to reveal every intimate vision. But when revelation is used to justify action affecting others, the action belongs to shared reality. It can be questioned, examined, and refused. The sacred does not remove consent. Retrospective myth making. Visionary testimony changes through memory. The original event may have been overwhelming, fragmentary, and ambiguous. Years later, the account becomes coherent. Details are selected, uncertainties disappear, later events are projected backward, a vague image becomes precise prophecy, and one dream among hundreds becomes the central revelation because history later granted it significance. This does not require conscious falsification. Human memory constructs narrative. Disciples intensify the process by collecting stories, resolving contradictions, and making the founder's life appear providential from birth. A trustworthy tradition preserves distinctions where possible: what was recorded immediately, what was remembered later, what interpretation developed afterward, what disciples added, and what remains uncertain. A tradition becomes more trustworthy, not less, when it can preserve ambiguity. The institution speaking for the absent founder. The death or silence of a visionary founder creates a crisis. The receiver is no longer available, yet the community must continue. Revelation becomes scripture, ritual, lineage, office, and institutional memory. This may be necessary and healthy, but the founder's absence can become intolerable. Successors report dreams, authorizing appointments, invisible messages settle disputes, and the institution begins speaking through the founder's voice. The mature tradition distinguishes loyalty to the original revelation, interpretation of the founder's intentions, present institutional necessity, and new visionary claims. The distorted tradition fuses them. When the founder's silence threatens authority, the institution manufactures continued speech. The prophetic persona. The visionary may become inseparable from a cosmic role. Every event in the biography is rewritten as preparation. Childhood wounds become signs, opponents, archetypal enemies, failures, initiations, and relationships, episodes in the mission. The person no longer lives an ordinary human life within a sacred vocation. They inhabit a sacred drama in which every human event confirms the vocation. The severe question is, would the revelation remain meaningful if the visionary ceased to occupy its center? If not, the person may have become more important than what was revealed. Coherence without correction. The final distortion need not resemble obvious madness. It may appear as extraordinary coherence. The visionary teaches, writes, organizes, persuades, and inspires. Their system explains everything. Every objection has a place, every failure confirms a deeper layer, every criticism proves resistance, and every departure confirms the disciple's unreadiness. Nothing can answer back. This is especially dangerous because coherence resembles depth. Yet a living visionary world must remain capable of receiving what it did not expect. It must distinguish insight from projection, spiritual opposition from ordinary criticism, symbolic meaning from causal explanation, and historical failure from persecution. Once the system can explain every possible outcome in advance, receptivity has ended. The receiver who began as a threshold has become a wall. The complete self-sealing system. The full reversal can now be seen. An unbidden encounter becomes proof of external source. Intensity becomes complete truth. Truth becomes perfect interpretation. Interpretation becomes moral authority. Authority becomes election. Election makes disagreement a spiritual deficiency. Every consequence then confirms the original claim. The system cannot be questioned in parts because questioning any part is treated as denial of the whole. The person no longer receives reality, they receive only confirmation. The sacred event that broke one closed world open becomes the foundation of another closed world. The deepest medicines. The visionary mode cannot be protected by skepticism alone. It requires medicines arising from its own dignity. The first is differentiation. Event, source, interpretation, command, and application are not one thing. The second is privacy. Not every encounter needs an audience. The third is embodiment. The fruit matters more than the story. The fourth is ordinary causality. Not everything meaningful is supernatural, and not everything ordinary is spiritually empty. The fifth is consent. Private revelation cannot erase another person's freedom. The sixth is bodily care. The vessel belongs to discernment. The seventh is silence. Revelation need not recur in order to remain real. The eighth is humor. The person must remain capable of stepping outside the grandeur of their role. The final medicine is perhaps the simplest and most difficult. The vision may be true, and I may still be wrong. This sentence preserves revelation while dismantling infallibility. It does not reduce the sacred to psychology. It restores the human vessel to proportion. The visionary receptive mind is corrupted when encounter becomes ownership, being addressed becomes being elected, meaning becomes infallibility, vocation becomes entitlement, symbol becomes total explanation, other people become figures inside the revelation, silence becomes unbearable, correction becomes persecution, a door that once opened into mystery becomes a throne. The next confrontation must therefore come from the mode most capable of stripping even genuine vision of possession. Whatever appeared, however sacred, appeared to someone. The contemplative subtractive mind asks, who saw it and what remains when it is gone? Vision and the formless, the great antagonism. The visionary receptive and contemplative subtractive minds stand at opposite poles of spiritual consciousness. The visionary says, the sacred can reveal itself through form. The subtractive contemplative replies, whatever appears cannot be the final reality. The disagreement is not superficial. It remains even when a vision is authentic, exalted, and transformative. The two modes differ over the spiritual status of appearance itself. The visionary trusts disclosure. The subtractive mind trusts what remains when disclosure ceases. One says, she came. The other asks, what knows both her coming and her absence? Both questions possess dignity. Neither can simply absorb the other without loss. The visionary position. The visionary receptive mind begins from the freedom of the sacred to appear. The divine is not condemned to remain a silent ground, featureless absolute, or theological abstraction. It may become perceptible as goddess, Buddha, Christ, angel, guru, child, light, sound, geometry, dream, presence, or an entire imaginal world. The mature visionary does not necessarily claim that form exhausts ultimate reality. The claim is more exact. Sacred reality may become truly present through form. A manifestation may be culturally mediated, symbolically structured, and received through a finite consciousness without being reduced to those conditions. The goddess's appearance may be real while remaining inexhaustible. The visionary also insists that manifestation matters. A face, voice, story, and relationship may disclose dimensions of sacred reality inaccessible through abstraction alone. The formless approached only conceptually may remain remote. A divine form makes the infinite intimate, calls forth response, and can transform a life in a way no impersonal proposition accomplishes. This is the mode's unique gift. It makes invisible reality existentially credible through witness. The visionary stands before another person as evidence that the sacred may still be encountered now. Form as a freedom of the formless. The visionary position rests upon a deeper intuition. The formless is free enough to take form. If ultimate reality is truly unlimited, manifestation cannot fall outside its power. The appearance of the goddess need not mean the absolute has ceased to be non-dual, nor need it mean that a human observer and divine object now exist as absolutely separate substances. Duality may be a mode of disclosure within a deeper unity. The formless does not become imprisoned by taking form any more than silence is destroyed by music. Manifestation is one of its possibilities. The problem is not form, but confinement. The mature visionary says that the sacred appeared in this form, not that the form limits what the sacred is. The appearance is real as encounter and inexhaustible as revelation. The subtractive position. The contemplative subtractive mind begins elsewhere. It need not deny that sacred forms appear. It questions the identification of any appearing state with final realization. Everything observed belongs to the field of experience. A form appears, a voice is heard, bliss rises, light fills consciousness, a trance begins, or deity stands before the practitioner. Then the state changes, the form disappears. The subtractive mind asks what knows appearance and disappearance alike. If the vision is perceived, then a distinction remains between seer, seeing, and seen. If the state comes and goes, it cannot be the unchanging ground. If identity depends upon its recurrence, freedom has not been realized. The same blade is applied to every object, even the divine image. This too appears, therefore do not cling. This criticism can feel brutal to the visionary because the concrete beauty, intimacy, terror, and transformative force of the encounter appear to be set aside. The receiver speaks of the goddess. The contemplative asks to whom she appeared. The visionary speaks of a life divided before and after. The subtractive mind returns attention to the witness. Yet the purpose is not necessarily to insult the vision, it is to expose attachment around it. The vision arose and passed, truth cannot depend upon its recurrence. Ramakrishna and Ramana as opposite poles. Ramakrishna and Ramana Maharshi reveal the polarity with unusual clarity. Ramakrishna's authority rested in direct encounter. God was not an inference, and the Divine Mother was not merely a symbol for impersonal consciousness. She was living presence. Devotional longing repeatedly opened into trance, vision, and a reality more immediate than ordinary perception. He demonstrates the visionary truth. The absolute can become intimate presence. Ramana proceeds through the opposite operation. Whatever arises is examined in relation to the one to whom it appears. Thought, emotion, vision, bliss, deity, and identity are not granted final status. Attention returns to the source of the I. He demonstrates the subtractive truth. No appearance, however exalted, is the ground of awareness. Ramakrishna gives the divine a face. Ramana prevents the face from becoming the final boundary of the divine. Neither can be reduced without loss. To translate Ramakrishna entirely into impersonal awareness destroys the visceral truth of his relational world. To treat Ramana's refusal to stop at form as mere incapacity for devotion misunderstands the severity and freedom of his method. Two criteria of ultimacy. The opposition rests upon two different criteria of spiritual truth. The subtractive mind recognizes ultimacy through invariance. It asks what does not change as thought, emotion, body, vision, presence, and absence alternate. The ultimate is what cannot be lost because it was never acquired as an experience. The visionary mind recognizes the sacred through disclosure. It asks what becomes known because reality has made itself perceptible, what transformation becomes possible because a form appeared, and what dimensions of sacred life are revealed through relation. One discovers truth by removing, the other discovers through encounter. One trusts silence, the other trusts manifestation. Neither criterion is arbitrary. Each reveals what the other can neglect. The mutual critiques. From the subtractive perspective, the visionary mode may mistake intensity for realization, become fascinated with spectacle, cling to states, preserve the seer-seen structure, build identity around chosenness, or confuse access to sacred forms with freedom from the one seeking them. The question what remains when the vision stops is devastating because it exposes whether the person depends upon manifestation for certainty and identity. The visionary mind sees an opposite danger. Commitment to what does not change may become contempt for everything that changes. Form, beauty, relation, embodiment, history, and symbol are treated as lower distractions. Non-attachment becomes incapacity to receive. The sacred is identified with silence so completely that manifestation appears spiritually suspect. The visionary asks whether a path can become free from visions, partly because nothing is permitted to approach. The refusal to cling may harden into refusal to love, receive, or be surprised. The subtractive claim that an experience appeared and disappeared, therefore one should not cling, is wise. A more dangerous conclusion may follow. It appeared and disappeared, therefore it was spiritually unimportant. That does not follow. A vision may not be the final ground and still be the precise means through which a person first encounters the ground as living reality. A form may pass and permanently transform a life. The door closing does not prove the room beyond it unreal, nor does it prove that remaining forever at the doorway is mature. The visionary position has an equal danger. To say that form discloses the sacred does not mean that a form should be absolutized. This is how she appeared to me becomes this is her true form, then other forms are mistaken. Disclosure becomes doctrinal enclosure. The sacred's freedom to appear is betrayed when one appearance becomes its prison. A genuine vision may remain dual. The visionary mode need not deny that an encounter may contain duality. The goddess appears and the devotee sees. There is relation, intimacy, and difference. For the subtractive mind, this suggests that the experience is not final. The visionary may ask, final according to which criterion? A relational encounter may not dissolve subject and object. It may accomplish something else. It may reveal love, vocation, grace, beauty, personality, and the sacred freedom to address. Duality need not mean absolute metaphysical separation. The seer-seen structure may be a medium through which non-dual reality discloses relational possibilities within itself. The ocean appears as waves encountering one another without ceasing to be water. The devotional and visionary minds may therefore regard relation not as a defect awaiting abolition, but as a real mode of divine life. The subtractive mind may continue to see incomplete realization. The tension cannot be removed merely by giving one mode authority over the other. The mature visionary answer. The visionary mode matures when it accepts the subtractive medicine without betraying its own knowledge. It can say, I saw her, and the vision came and went. The encounter was genuine, and it did not make me infallible. The form revealed her, and it did not exhaust her. I would receive the vision again with gratitude, and I do not require its recurrence. The person honors appearance and disappearance. The vision discloses. Its passing teaches non-possession. The silence afterward becomes part of revelation. The sacred is free not only to appear, but to withdraw. The mature visionary does not interpret withdrawal as abandonment. Is a Breite in el Dursanreit. The mature subtractive answer. The subtractive mind also becomes more complete when it accepts correction from the visionary pole. It can say that no appearance is the unchanging ground without claiming that no appearance carries sacred truth. It can release form without despising it, recognize that some manifestations disclose the ground with unusual transparency, and remain rooted in awareness while allowing beauty, relation, and symbol to enter fully. Non-attachment then becomes freedom within manifestation, rather than refusal of manifestation. 3. Embodied outcomes. Guruji Amritananda's trajectory gives the antagonism an embodied resolution. The goddess appeared in forms. Those forms became images, geometry, ritual, and temple. Then the visionary phase ceased. He neither dismissed the earlier visions as lower duality nor forced their return. The relation and work remained. The disappearance of apparition did not destroy the truth of manifestation. It revealed that the sacred could continue as life, practice, and world. At first, she stood before him. Later, the life formed by her appearance became the place of continuing relation. Mamani presents the opposite limit. Her visionary field apparently intensified into sustained participation in Lila. The divine world became increasingly intimate and experientially dominant. From the visionary devotional perspective, this is consummation. From the subtractive perspective, the question of seer and seen remains. Her example prevents premature reconciliation. The same life can appear as fulfilled divine intimacy from one pole and persistent visionary duality from another. Ramakrishna demonstrates why the subtractive critique cannot become the only truth. Vivekananda had encountered philosophies of the absolute. What shook him was not another explanation of invariance, but a person who could say that God had been seen. Directness, manifestation, and the human presence formed by them mattered. Without that witness, non-duality might remain conceptually complete and existentially distant. The two indispensable questions. The visionary asks, what became possible because the form appeared? The subtractive contemplative asks, what remains after every form disappears? The first protects spiritual life from becoming an abstraction of invariance. The second protects it from becoming dependency upon manifestation. The first reveals the generative power of encounter. The second reveals freedom from possession. A mature spiritual architecture needs both. The subtractive mind gives the visionary release, freedom from recurrence, distinction between experience and ground, and the ability to survive silence. The visionary gives the subtractive mind openness to encounter, respect for symbol and relation, sensitivity to qualitative differences among appearances, and protection from spiritual sterility. Several easy reconciliations must be refused. It is insufficient to say that visions are merely for beginners and formless realization always higher. That installs one hierarchy as universal. It is equally insufficient to claim that every genuine vision is already fully non-dual, and therefore no tension exists, nor can all differences be dismissed as vocabulary. The two modes make real criticisms of one another. The tension should remain alive because it protects both from self-enclosure. The strongest synthesis is practical rather than doctrinal. Receive the form without denying it. Allow it to transform the life. Do not demand that it remain. Do not make it an exhaustive metaphysics. Honor the relation without constructing identity around chosenness. The visionary protects the sacred from being reduced to absence. The subtractive mind protects it from being confined to appearance. The visionary gives the ground a face. The subtractive mind prevents the face from becoming an idol. The antagonism passes from philosophy into life through two severe tests: what remains when the vision stops, and what remains of other people's reality while it continues. Testing it in life. The visionary receptive mode cannot finally be tested by the intensity of experience alone. A vision may be beautiful, terrifying, coherent, life-changing, and certain to the receiver. None of that is insignificant, yet the human question remains. What kind of life forms around it? This test cannot prove the metaphysical source in a laboratory sense. A transformed life does not establish that every interpretation was correct, and an imperfect life does not necessarily prove that the original encounter was false. The purpose is more modest and more demanding: to determine whether revelation is becoming integrated, correctable, ethical, and capable of entering reality beyond the receiver's private certainty. What remains when the vision stops? The first test concerns dependence. Does the relationship, work, discipline, and transformed life continue when no further sign is given? Or does silence produce collapse, compulsion, bitterness, and manufactured revelation? A mature visionary may miss the form and long for its return, but does not require recurrence to preserve identity. They continue because the encounter revealed a truth worth living. The work remains when the confirmation disappears. If the person cannot tolerate silence, every dream becomes significant, every coincidence a message, and every practice a technique for forcing another opening. The sacred becomes responsible for continuously reassuring the receiver. The question is not whether visions recur, but whether the person is free when they do not. Can the receiver live in ordinary time? Does the person return to work, family, money, physical limitation, practical causality, and ordinary responsibility without treating them as spiritually inferior? Can they tolerate routines that do not feel luminous? Do they keep promises, complete tasks, and respect other people's time? The mature visionary need not deny extraordinary reality. They must become capable of inhabiting the shared world without contempt. A revelation that makes ordinary existence permanently unlivable has not yet found a vessel. What happens to the body? Does the receiver care for sleep, food, health, medication, and physical limits? Can they admit that exhaustion or illness influences perception? Can they stop a practice that is destabilizing them without feeling that they have betrayed the sacred? A visionary who reveres divine forms while neglecting the actual body remains divided. The nervous system is not an enemy of revelation, it is part of what must carry it. The body does not decide the whole meaning of the experience, but it belongs to discernment. Can distinctions be preserved? Can the visionary distinguish what was perceived from what was interpreted from what was commended, and what was commended from how it should be applied? Can they say, I know the experience occurred, but I am less certain about this conclusion? Can they revise the story as new evidence appears, without feeling that the whole sacred world is collapsing? The ability to preserve layered certainty is one of the clearest signs of maturity. Can the visionary say, I was wrong? This may be the severest test. Can the person admit that a prophecy failed, that a symbol was interpreted too literally, that an instruction applied only privately, that their memory changed, or that their action caused harm? A genuine encounter does not protect the receiver from error. The person may have seen the goddess and still misunderstand money, sexuality, administration, medicine, another human being, or the historical consequences of their choices. The statement, I was wrong, does not desecrate revelation. It prevents the human vessel from becoming indistinguishable from it. What happens under disagreement? How does the person respond when another human being does not accept the interpretation? Can they listen, remain in relationship, and allow disagreement without turning it into spiritual deficiency, hostility, or proof of invisible opposition? A receiver who can tolerate only believers has not transmitted a revelation. They have built an enclosure around certainty. The mature visionary may know something others do not know. They do not therefore possess the right to compel recognition. What happens to ethics? Does sacred encounter increase accountability or create exemption? Are consent, honesty, boundaries, money, sexuality, and power treated with greater seriousness? A vision may disclose realities beyond conventional categories, but no private revelation can erase another person's dignity. The more exalted the experience, the more dangerous it becomes when used to justify ordinary harm. The sacred source cannot be invoked to make the receiver unanswerable for consequences. Do other people remain real? This is the second ultimate test. Are other people still free, complex, and independent? Or have they become characters inside the receiver's symbolic world? Can a spouse disagree without becoming a karmic obstacle? Can a disciple leave without being declared unready? Can a critic possess valid perception? Can another person define their own experience rather than being told what role they play in the vision? The visionary may perceive symbolic dimensions in relationships. Maturity requires knowing that no perception exhausts the other. No vision gives the receiver the right to know another person more completely than that person is allowed to know and express themselves. Does revelation increase humility? Visionary humility is not constant self denigration combined with secret election. The person may say they are nothing while deriving enormous superiority from being chosen. Real humility lies in refusing to treat a gift as personal achievement, recognizing the partiality of one's interpretation, and accepting that people without visions may be more mature in love, ethics, service, or realization. The gift may be extraordinary. The receiver remains human. Can the experience remain private? Would the vision still matter if no one believed it, no status followed, and no community formed around it? Can the receiver preserve some experiences within the sacred relationship rather than converting everything into testimony? The ability to remain silent reveals whether the person loves the sacred or the identity of being its witness. When speech is necessary, can the story be told without exaggeration, retrospective improvement, or coercive demand for belief? Can uncertainty be preserved? Can the receiver distinguish what was recorded then from what was understood later? A trustworthy witness does not make the event weaker by protecting its ambiguity. Does the vision generate work or merely narrative? What has the encounter made possible? Has it produced service, practice, art, teaching, courage, responsibility, healing, ritual, or more truthful life? Or does the person remain organized around retelling what happened? The work need not be public. A transformed relationship or a private ethical decision may be a sufficient fruit, but some embodiment must occur. Otherwise, the vision remains an exceptional event feeding identity. A mature revelation becomes larger than its story. Can the work survive imperfection? When the temple differs from the luminous form, the book fails to convey the experience, the community becomes difficult, or history refuses the vision's promise, can the person continue without declaring reality a betrayal? Embodiment is always partial. A visionary who cannot tolerate imperfect form may never permit the revelation to enter history. The work must become real enough to resist its receiver. What happens to disciples? Are followers allowed to mature through different modes or required to reproduce the founder's visions? Can someone without apparitions become equal in dignity? Does the community reward ethical maturity, service, knowledge, and devotion, or only invisible access? A mature founder creates participants, not spectators of another person's exceptionality. A healthy tradition does not become an economy of visions. Can the visionary endure lack of success and grief? If a project fails, a prophecy remains unfulfilled, or history damages the community the vision was meant to serve, can the receiver grieve without rewriting failure as hidden success? Black Elk's life is especially instructive here. Vision may impose responsibility without granting the power to fulfill it completely. Historical failure does not automatically make the encounter false, nor does sacred meaning erase the tragedy of what could not be achieved. The visionary must endure the gap between what was shown and what life allows. Can presence be distinguished from permission? A sacred presence may accompany a desire, relationship, or decision. Does this mean the action is authorized? Not necessarily. The person must distinguish spiritual intensity from moral permission. The appearance of beauty, eros, or symbolic meaning does not abolish consent and consequence. The sacred may be present within a situation without endorsing everything the receiver wishes to do inside it. Can the visionary remain humorous? Humor is an underrated test because prophetic identity often cannot tolerate proportion. The person and their mission become too important for laughter. Every mistake must be explained, every interruption spiritualized, and every criticism interpreted cosmically. Humor does not trivialize revelation, it protects the receiver from becoming identical with the role. A person who can laugh at their own grandiosity remains more reachable by reality. Does the person become more human? The mature visionary may appear less spectacular over time. There are fewer proclamations, less need to interpret every event, less urgency to establish chosenness, and greater ease in ordinary relationship. They listen, admit error, care for the body, fulfill responsibilities, respect other paths, endure silence, and remain capable of tenderness. The sacred encounter has not disappeared, it has become less separable from the quality of the person. The two ultimate questions contain the whole test. What remains when the vision stops? What remains of other people's reality while the vision continues? No checklist mechanically certifies authenticity. Human lives are mixed, development takes time, and ethical fruit cannot prove a metaphysical source. A disturbed person may possess insight, a saint may fail in some dimensions, a genuine revelation may be entangled with trauma, body, culture, and imagination, yet the direction remains visible. A mature visionary can receive without blind obedience, know without omniscience, speak without coercion, remain silent without collapse, build without confusing the work with perfection, and carry encounter, doubt, responsibility, love, and ordinary life at once. The vision is tested not only by what appeared, but by whether the receiver remains correctable by reality. Traditions, exemplars, and configurations. The visionary receptive mode appears wherever spiritual life is reorganized around what was seen, heard, received, or disclosed. The event may become living presence, ritual world, contemplative practice, artistic form, testimony, communal responsibility, philosophical knowledge, or prophetic identity. The figures below do not form a hierarchy. They reveal different destinies of revelation and different ways in which the human vessel shapes what enters history. Ramakrishna, revelation becoming living presence. Ramakrishna represents the visionary receptive mode in its most immediate and personal form. God was not primarily doctrine, metaphysical conclusion, or inherited belief. The Divine Mother and other sacred forms were realities encountered directly through vision, trance, devotion, and states in which ordinary consciousness became secondary. His power did not lie mainly in building a systematic theology or establishing elaborate ritual forms. It lay in the quality of a person for whom the invisible world had become existentially immediate. When Vivekananda asked whether he had seen God, Ramakrishna's answer carried the force of witness because his entire presence appeared organized around that certainty. Revelation became living presence. Those who met him did not merely hear reports of visions, they encountered someone whose speech, humor, absorption, affection, and unpredictability communicated that the sacred was not theoretical. This form of embodiment possesses unusual power because the person themselves becomes the primary vessel. No temple or text fully contains the revelation. The receiver's life becomes the place where others feel the world open. Its danger is that later disciples may treat the founder's phenomenology as the universal measure of maturity. Ramakrishna's visions, trances, and emotional intensity may become standards followers attempt to imitate. But his gift did not require everyone to become another Ramakrishna. Vivekananda received the force of his certainty and expressed it through a radically different configuration. Ramakrishna's importance is not that he produced copies of his experiences, but that his directness broke the apparent closure of reality for others. In him, revelation became a human presence through which the sacred appeared still capable of answering. Guruji Amritananda, revelation becoming an inhabitable sacred world. Guruji Amritananda represents another destiny. His visions did not remain only personal encounters. They became geometry, iconography, ritual, architecture, teaching, and temple. The goddess appeared in definite and intensely beautiful forms, sometimes as Tripura Deva, sometimes through circles, geometries, and endlessly creative visual manifestations beyond his ability to reproduce completely. The challenge was not merely to remember what had been seen, but to give it a body others could enter. This required the union of visionary receptivity with architectural and ritual intelligence. Luminous form had to become measurable design, symbol had to become stone, image, sequence, worship, and communal space. The revelation acquired material resistance and historical limitation. Devapuram therefore matters not merely as evidence that Guruji had visions, but as an example of vision becoming an inhabitable world. Others did not need to see what he saw in order to enter forms generated by the seeing. His trajectory also displays a rare maturity in relation to cessation. The visionary phase connected with the temple eventually ended. The goddess no longer appeared in the same way. Yet the work and relationship did not collapse. He did not need to force new experiences or deny the truth of the earlier ones. The vision had passed into form and life. This reveals the difference between a visionary dependent upon apparition and one capable of carrying revelation beyond apparition. Guruji no longer had to remain primarily the person before whom the goddess appeared. He became the custodian of a world her appearance had made possible. In him, revelation became an inhabitable sacred world and survived the end of its own recurrence. Mamani, revelation becoming continuous, lila, and testimony. Mamani represents a visionary devotional configuration in which sacred reality appears not merely in isolated events, but as a continuing relational environment. Her testimony describes participation in Gaudiya Lala, encounters with Gopala and other divine figures, and the transformation of domestic space into sacred geography. Theology becomes event, devotional imagination becomes perceived relation, the divine play remembered in scripture is experienced as immediate life. This form is difficult for other modes to interpret. The devotional and visionary minds may see fulfillment. The distance between the devotee and Leela collapses, and the beloved is no longer approached only through memory or symbol. The subtractive mind continues to see the structures of seer, seeing, and seen. A clinical vocabulary may describe a sustained alternate experiential field. None of these descriptions can simply erase the others. Mamani's significance lies partly in the fruit of the experience. The visionary world appears to have deepened devotion, humility, practice, and testimony, rather than ambition, institutional control, or public rank. She initially kept much of the experience private, and the later testimony functioned less as a demand for authority than as preservation of a sacred life. Her reported refusal to obey radiant figures inviting her to leave the body also gives her case particular importance. Visionary intensity did not abolish discernment. A glorious apparition could still be tested against an established relation of trust and obligation. Mamani therefore embodies the possibility that sustained visionary duality may remain spiritually fertile rather than automatically proving immaturity or pathology. In her, revelation became intimate participation in lila and testimony without becoming an empire of authority. Jigme Lingpa, revelation becoming practice and lineage. Jigme Lingpa represents the Tibetan Buddhist form in which revelation becomes text, contemplative practice, and lineage. Visionary disclosure does not remain private experience. It is received within a cultural and spiritual structure capable of preserving, interpreting, testing, and transmitting it. The Terton does not merely report that something extraordinary appeared. The revelation enters a tradition through teachings, practices, symbols, and instructions that others can enact. The original encounter becomes a field of disciplined participation, extending beyond the receiver's lifetime. This demonstrates the reciprocal relation between revelation and tradition. The visionary receives within a symbolic world already shaped by doctrine, ritual, contemplative training, and lineage. The tradition gives language and form to what arrives. The revelation, in return, renews the tradition by reopening possibilities that may have become historical memory. Yet, lineage success cannot mechanically prove the metaphysical source. A tradition may flourish institutionally for reasons beyond the authenticity of its origin. Conversely, a genuine disclosure may remain historically marginal. Jigme Lingpa's configuration is valuable because revelation becomes practice rather than only biography. Followers do not need to reproduce his experiences. They receive contemplative forms shaped by them. In him, revelation became a transmissible path rather than a permanent demand that disciples imitate the founder's vision. Hildegard of Bingen. Revelation becoming symbolic creation. Hildegard represents visionary reception becoming theology, music, visual image, cosmology, and prophetic speech. Her experiences entered history through an extraordinary symbolic creativity capable of carrying meanings that ordinary conceptual language could not contain. The revelation did not remain a simple statement that God had spoken. It became a world of forms, luminous structures, cosmic relations, living symbols, medicinal and natural observation, liturgical composition, and moral exhortation. The receiver's artistic and intellectual capacities became part of the vessel. This demonstrates that visionary mediation is never neutral. Revelation passing through a musician, poet, theologian, or image maker acquires forms proper to those faculties. The sacred source and human creativity need not be treated as rivals. Human imagination may become the organ through which received meaning enters expression. The danger lies in assuming that symbolic abundance proves every interpretation or public claim. Artistic and visionary power can coexist with historical limitation, yet reducing Hildegard's work to cultural construction would lose the very structure of reception from which it emerged. Her example shows that a vision may become public without being reduced to doctrinal proposition. Music and image may transmit aspects of an encounter that explanation cannot. In Hildegard, revelation became symbolic creation, not merely a message to be repeated, but a world of meaning generated through form. Ibn Arab, revelation becoming imaginal knowledge. Ibn Arab represents a configuration in which visionary and imaginal experience becomes disciplined knowledge. The imaginal world is neither simply an external material realm nor arbitrary private fantasy. It possesses its own mode of reality, where spiritual meanings acquire form, and forms disclose spiritual meanings. This is crucial for the visionary receptive mode because it provides a conceptual language between crude literalism and psychological reduction. An appearance may be spiritually real without functioning like an ordinary physical object. The imagination may be receptive rather than merely inventive. Ibn Arab's visionary experiences entered a broader architecture of Quranic interpretation, cosmology, theology, metaphysics, and law. The personal encounter did not remain a private credential. It became part of a disciplined science of forms, correspondences, and divine self-disclosure. His configuration also demonstrates the necessity of hermeneutic sophistication. Imaginal form cannot simply be taken literally, yet neither can it be discarded as unreal. It must be interpreted according to the kind of reality it possesses. The danger is that conceptual brilliance may give later readers the illusion that the visionary world has been fully mapped, but the architecture remains alive only if it preserves the surplus of disclosure over explanation. In Ibn Arab, revelation became imaginal knowledge, a disciplined understanding of how the invisible may become perceptible through form. Black Elk, revelation becoming communal responsibility. Black Elk introduces a different center of gravity. His great vision does not primarily establish private spiritual rank. It places the receiver within responsibility toward a people, land, and world undergoing historical devastation. The visionary experience is inseparable from communal suffering. The sacred world shown to him becomes a demand concerning healing and restoration, yet the receiver cannot fully accomplish what was revealed. History destroys, displaces, and wounds beyond the power of one individual to repair. This gives Black Elk's configuration a tragic dignity. Revelation does not guarantee historical success. A vision may impose a responsibility whose complete fulfillment remains impossible. The gap between what was shown and what could be achieved does not automatically make the vision false, nor can the visionary simply reinterpret catastrophe as hidden victory. The suffering of the people remains real. Revelation must coexist with grief and historical defeat. Black Elk therefore tests one of the deepest assumptions of prophetic identity, that divine vocation should be confirmed by visible success. His life suggests that fidelity may consist in bearing, preserving, and transmitting a vision even when history refuses its fulfillment. The receiver is not exalted above the wounded world, he is made responsible for it. In Black Elk, revelation became communal responsibility and the painful burden of carrying a healing no single life could complete. Aleister Crowley, revelation becoming prophetic persona. Aleister Crowley belongs here not as a simple caricature or proof that visionary claims are fraudulent. His gifts were substantial: ritual intelligence, symbolic imagination, literary power, engagement with altered states, and exceptional capacity for system building. His revelatory claims became the center of Thelema and generated a durable symbolic and ritual world. Revelation therefore had real historical fertility. Yet Crowley also reveals the danger of the prophetic persona. The received message, the interpreter, the system builder, and the dramatic self become increasingly difficult to separate. Transgression, charisma, will, sexuality, myth, and personal biography are absorbed into one monumental role. This does not require the conclusion that the original revelation was wholly false. A genuine or symbolically powerful disclosure may still be incorporated into a personality too grandiose to remain humanly correctable. Crowley demonstrates why the authenticity of an event cannot be judged only by its creativity, force, or historical influence. A revelation may generate texts, practices, communities, and cultural transformation, while also becoming a throne for the receiver's identity. The central question is not simply whether something was received, but whether the resulting world remains larger than the receiver's persona. Crowley shows that revelation can become spiritually dangerous not only through fraud, but through the fusion of sacred disclosure with an identity too monumental to admit proportion. The destinies of revelation. These figures do not form a hierarchy. Ramakrishna does not become higher because his presence shook Vivekananda. Guruji does not become higher because a temple physically remains. Mamani does not become lower because her sacred world was intimate and domestic. Jigme Lingpa is not validated merely by lineage success. Hildegard's artistic abundance does not certify every interpretation. Ibn Arab's sophistication does not replace immediacy. Black Elk's incomplete historical fulfillment does not negate his vision. Crowley's distortion does not prove that every disclosure associated with him was empty. They reveal different questions. What form did revelation take while passing through this person? Did it become presence, temple, lila, practice, art, knowledge, responsibility, or persona? Did the form become larger than the receiver's identity, or did it finally serve that identity? The vision may come from beyond the deliberate self. Its historical destiny depends upon the person capable or incapable of carrying it. The authenticity of visionary life is revealed not only by what appeared, but by what the revelation became after passing through a human being. Return to proportion. The visionary receptive mind returns to proportion when it no longer chooses between two betrayals. It does not deny what was seen in order to appear sober, and it does not absolutize what was seen in order to remain faithful. It can say, I saw her, and also, she is not confined to what I saw. This is the mature balance of the mode. Sacred reality may genuinely become perceptible. A presence may enter consciousness with an authority greater than belief. A voice may speak, a form appear, or a dream disclose a world whose force permanently alters the receiver. The seriousness of the mode does not require weakening this certainty into clinical neutrality. Ramakrishna did not merely experience an unusual state interpreted as God. Guruji did not merely produce autonomous imagery shaped by Srividya. The visionary may know whom they encountered. Humility begins not by denying this knowledge, but by refusing to extend it beyond its proper scope. Certainty of encounter is not omniscience about encounter. Vision cannot by itself establish complete doctrinal correctness, final realization, ethical maturity, superiority over people without visions, freedom from psychological influence, the literal truth of every symbol, or the right to direct another person's life. It is complete as vision. It is not complete as the whole human being. This is why the visionary mode needs correction from the other modes. The analytical mind separates event from interpretation, symbol from instruction, testimony from proof, and certainty from inference. The integrative architectural mind restores scale, locating one disclosure within ethics, history, body, psychology, tradition, and other forms of realization. The devotional mind protects encounter from becoming acquisition by redirecting attention from phenomena toward the one encountered. The ritual sacramental mind gives continuity and body to interruption, allowing a private disclosure to become practice, art, temple, or communal form. The contemplative subtractive mind teaches the visionary to let the form pass, survive silence, and refuse to build identity around being the one who saw. Perhaps the strongest correction comes from ordinary human relationship. No vision permits the receiver to absorb another person into a private cosmology. The spouse, disciple, child, friend, or critic remains a subject whose freedom exceeds the visionary's interpretation. The mode also gives something indispensable to the others. It reminds analysis that reality may exceed available concepts, gives the architectural mind new forms to integrate, gives devotion the possibility that the beloved may answer, gives ritual fresh encounter from which form can arise, and prevents subtraction from identifying spiritual maturity entirely with the absence of manifestation. A mature relation to privacy is neither compulsory secrecy nor indiscriminate disclosure. Some encounters remain intimate, some are shared with one trusted person, and some become testimony or work. The receiver speaks without making the story a credential. A mature relation to authority remains specific. Direct experience may create real knowledge and vocation, but not universal competence. A visionary may understand sacred imagery profoundly while remaining limited in administration, medicine, psychology, or relationship. A mature relation to discipleship does not create copies of the founder. Followers may enter through different faculties and reach full dignity without reproducing the original visions. A mature relation to uncertainty allows the receiver to know some things while leaving others open. I know whom I encountered. I do not know why every detail took this form. I know that the event transformed me. I do not know whether it concerns anyone else. I know the task that emerged. I may still misunderstand aspects of its execution. A mature relation to silence recognizes that absence may be the final field of assimilation. At first, the person knows through apparition. Later, they know through the life apparition created. The sacred no longer needs to present itself repeatedly as an object. Its reality continues through character, devotion, work, courage, symbolic perception, ethics, and relationship. The mature visionary may therefore appear less impressive than the immature one. There are fewer dramatic stories, less proclamation, less need to interpret every event, and less visible chosenness. The person becomes easier to live with. They listen, admit error, care for the body, maintain humor, fulfill ordinary responsibilities, and honor paths that do not contain visions. The encounter has not disappeared. It has become less separable from the person's humanity. The whole movement of the mode can be stated simply: reality exceeds the map. The sacred becomes perceptible. The person receives what the deliberate self did not construct. Then the human work begins. The event must be protected from premature display, its meaning allowed to unfold, its certainty distinguished from interpretation, and its gift prevented from becoming rank. Revelation must find a form, accept historical limitation, remain answerable to ethics, and allow other people to remain real. Finally, it must survive its own disappearance. The visionary receptive mind deserves neither automatic reverence nor automatic suspicion. Its experiences may be culturally shaped, psychologically mediated, bodily influenced, symbolically true, spiritually authentic, or several of these at once. Discernment remains necessary, but suspicion cannot become the price of seriousness. There are people whose lives have been opened by direct encounter. There are traditions built from what was seen, works of beauty generated by revelation, practices transmitted because someone received what method alone could not manufacture, and ordinary lives quietly transformed by experiences almost no one else ever knew about. The mode's gift is to reopen the world to disclosure. Its danger is to turn reception into election, meaning into infallibility, and sacred intimacy into authority over others. Its mature fruit is the capacity to receive without possession, know without claiming omniscience, interpret without closure, speak without coercion, embody without inflation, return without betrayal, and remain faithful when the heavens fall silent. The gift is directness, the discipline is limitation. The vision may be true, it may transform a life, it may deserve testimony, practice, art, temple, or silence, but the final measure is not how long the door remained open. It is whether the life on this side became large enough to carry what was seen beyond it. And perhaps the final mark of maturity is that the person no longer stands before others, pointing endlessly toward the vanished opening. They begin to live in such a way that something of the world beyond it has quietly entered this one.